A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
Hey everyone, it's Ruth. I never thought I'd find myself sharing my story online, but here I am, spilling my heart out in hopes that maybe someone out there can relate or find solace in my words. It feels like I'm pouring my soul into a void, but it's a necessary step in my journey, one that has taken me from the depths of despair to a place where I can finally reclaim my power. I'm sitting here in my dimly lit living room, the soft glow of my laptop illuminating the pages of my story. Outside my window, the crisp autumn leaves are falling, mirroring the changes that have occurred in my life over the past few months. The air is cool, a stark contrast to the fiery anger that once consumed me. Let me take you back to a few months ago when I was living in a small town that felt like a prison, a place where everyone knew everyone's business. I had always been the quiet girl, the one who blended into the background. My name was seldom mentioned in conversations, and when it was typically met with dismissive nods. But I think that's what made it all the more shocking when the chaos began. The key players in this story are two people, my so-called best friend, Lila, and my childhood crush, Jake. Lila and I had been inseparable ever since we were kids, but I now see our friendship through different eyes. She was my confidant, the one person I always thought I could count on. But betrayal has a way of stripping away the veneer of trust, and Lila's actions turned me into a different person entirely. Jake, on the other hand, was the boy every girl in town swooned over. With his tousled hair, warm smile, and those deep-set brown eyes, he was the embodiment of everything I dreamed of. We had shared a few sweet moments at school, stolen glances that had left my heart racing. But I never thought he noticed me the way I noticed him, until Lila decided to pull the rug out from under me. One Friday night, while the cool breeze whistled through the trees, I hosted a small gathering at my place, hoping to give Lila and Jake a chance to connect. I was excited, maybe even a little naive, thinking that my growing friendship with Jake would blossom into something more. But what I didn't know was that Lila had other plans. In a blindside I never saw coming, she chose that very night to reveal her own feelings for him. Over the laughter and music, in front of our friends, she leaned in and kissed him, leaving me frozen in disbelief. I could feel the warmth drain from my cheeks, my heart racing as the weight of betrayal settled over me like an unwelcome blanket. Lila had known how I felt, yet she chose to throw it all away. The cheers from our friends erupted in the background, but all I could hear was the deafening silence of my own heartbreak. I was exposed, vulnerable, and utterly lost. But what neither Lila nor Jake understood was that I wasn't going to lie down and accept this betrayal. I didn't have a grand plan formulated in that moment, but deep down, something ignited, a flicker of strength buried beneath my pain. I was done being the girl who didn't fight back. It was time to reclaim what was mine, to rewrite my story. So as I sit here, ready to share the twists and turns that led me to my ultimate revenge, I hope you stick around. Because trust me, you're about to witness a transformation that you won't forget. Don't think I can fight back. Watch this. In the days following that fateful night, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. Every time I walked through the hallways at school, I was met with snickers and whispers. It was as if I was suddenly a character in a tragic play, with Lila and Jake playing the leads while I was relegated to the background, a shadow of the person I used to be. I could almost see the headlines in my mind: Ruth the fool, best friend betrayed. How could Lila do that to me? I replayed that moment over and over in my head, her lips pressed against Jake's, the way her eyes sparkled with mischief, as if she had just pulled off the ultimate prank. I had always known her to be competitive, but this felt like stabbing me in the back while I was busy celebrating her victories. I tried to reach out to her, to make sense of it all, but every text was met with dry responses that sounded like she was reading from a script. The warmth that once colored our friendship had turned to ice. I remember one afternoon sitting across from her in our favorite cafe, my heart pounding like a drum as I finally mustered the courage to confront her. "Why, Lila? Why would you do that to me?" I whispered, my voice cracking under the strain of unspent tears. She looked up, a blend of confusion and indifference on her face. "You were never really in the running, Ruth. I thought you knew," she shrugged, as if dismissing the importance of everything we had built together. Those words cut deeper than any knife ever could. It was a betrayal fueled not just by a moment of passion, but by a chilling disregard for our history. I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces, each shard a reminder of the memories we had shared. My best friend had chosen to throw away years of trust for a fleeting moment of infatuation. She didn't just take Jake from me, she took away the one person I thought I could rely on. As for Jake, he didn't even bother to reach out to me. Instead, he seemed to bask in the attention now showered on him, laughing it off as if it was just another day in high school. Everyone saw him as the hero of this ridiculous story, the guy who had a choice between two girls and had chosen the one who was more willing to wear her heart on her sleeve. But what they didn't see was the hurt I felt, the way my heart twisted painfully whenever I spotted them together, his hand resting casually on the small of her back, her laughter ringing out like sweet music in my ears, while I stood frozen in the background, a mere spectator in my own life. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself spiraling into a dark abyss of anger and betrayal. I was enraged, not just at them, but at myself for letting it happen. I felt small and powerless, trapped in a world where the very people I loved had conspired against me. "Don't think I can fight back," echoed in my mind, taunting me, igniting a flame of determination I never knew I had. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly, I began to plot my revenge. I refocused my energy, channeling my pain into a plan that didn't involve petty revenge or malicious intent, but rather a journey of self-discovery. I started working out, pushing my body beyond its limits, and with it, I felt my confidence swell. I enrolled in a martial arts class, learning to harness my anger into strength. With each kick and punch, I felt the weight of betrayal lift just a little, replaced with a newfound resolve. But I knew that for my revenge to truly mean something, it needed to be about more than just reclaiming Jake or getting back at Lila. It had to be about reclaiming myself. I made it my mission to show them, and myself, that I was not the quiet girl who would simply fade away. The transformation was more than physical, it was an awakening of the spirit buried beneath layers of doubt and hurt. With each passing day, I grew stronger, both inside and out. I began to redefine who I was, shedding the insecurities that had once held me captive. The flicker of strength that had ignited that night began to blaze, and I realized that my best revenge would be to rewrite the narrative. I would no longer be a passive character in this story. I would take center stage. And so, with a heart full of fire and a head filled with resolve, I prepared to unleash the new me on an unsuspecting world, ready to show everyone that they were wrong about me. The time for passive acceptance was over, this was just the beginning. I was ready to reclaim my story. As the weeks turned into months, I felt the weight of my betrayal shift from a crushing burden to a simmering blaze of motivation, but just when I thought things might begin to level out, life threw unexpected challenges my way. It's as if the universe conspired against me, adding fuel to the fire of my resentment. The first blow came late one Friday evening, just as I was leaving martial arts class, adrenaline still pulsing through my veins. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket, and when I finally checked it, I was met with a barrage of messages from my classmates. A group chat titled "The Betrayed" had been created, an all too appropriate name for my situation, and it was filled with memes about me, images of me from my awkward phases, and jokes about how I was too unremarkable to be noticed by Jake in the first place. I felt my stomach drop as I scrolled through the comments, each one cutting deeper than the last. I tried to laugh it off, to show them that their words didn't bother me, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. I felt exposed, publicly ridiculed, and humiliated. They were all too happy to put me on display, as if I were a sideshow attraction. I could almost hear Lila's laughter ringing in the back of my mind, feeding off the chaos and pain she had sown. The realization that my entire friend group had turned against me, rallied around Lila's betrayal like moths to a flame, sent me spiraling once again. So, I did what any girl would do when faced with overwhelming mockery, I fought back. Not in the way they expected, but with silence. I deleted the app, turning off the notifications and shutting out their mockery. Instead, I focused on my training, pouring my heart into every punch, every kick, every drill. I began to develop a fierce determination, channeling my pain into something constructive. But it didn't stop there. It was during a weekend retreat for our martial arts class that things escalated further. A day filled with sweat and dedication turned into a nightmare when I overheard a conversation that would forever change my perception of Jake. I found myself sitting on a bench outside, catching my breath after an intense sparring session, when I overheard Jake and Lila talking, unaware of my presence. "I can't believe she thought she had any chance with you," Lila laughed, her voice dripping with condescension. "She really thought you'd choose her over me?" Jake's laughter rang out, and in that moment, something inside me shattered. The boy I had once idolized was reduced to a caricature of arrogance. "I mean, come on. She's just Ruth. It's not like she's ever stood out in any real way," he replied, his tone flippant and dismissive. "I didn't even know she liked me until the party." It was kind of sad, honestly. Those words sliced through me, igniting a fire of fury within my chest. Suddenly, it was clearer than ever that they were a toxic duo, two peas in a pod, thriving off their shared cruelty. I felt the rage bubbling up, and before I could stop myself, I stood up and confronted them. "Is that really what you think of me?" I spat, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. They turned to me, surprise etched on their faces. I felt powerful, a sudden surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, but the moment was fleeting as Jake smirked and shrugged, brushing off my presence as if I were a mere annoyance in his shadow. "What do you want, Ruth?" "I was just saying the truth," he replied, his arrogance palpable. Lila stood beside him, a smirk playing on her lips, clearly enjoying the confrontation. At that moment, I realized something crucial. I had to shift my approach. I couldn't let them get away with treating me like this. I had transformed into someone who wouldn't just sit back and take it. I was ready to fight back. As I walked away from that confrontation, I felt a new determination settle over me like a protective cloak. I would no longer stay silent or allow them to dictate my worth. This wasn't just about revenge, this was about reclaiming my life and my self-esteem. But the escalation didn't stop there. The next week, as I walked through the school halls, I noticed that my classmates had upped the ante. Lila and Jake had orchestrated an event that would seal my fate, a school carnival, an intimate gathering of everyone who had once been my friends, with me as the uninvited guest. They posted about it all over social media, making it was a Friday afternoon when I stumbled upon the fateful invitation, the final straw that snapped the last thread of patience I had left. I was idly scrolling through my socials, trying to distract myself from the tide of rage that had been building up inside me. My heart raced as I saw it, a glossy flyer plastered across various platforms, featuring bright colors and cute doodles that seemed to mock me. "Join us for the most epic night of fun at the annual school carnival, party popper emoji, sparkles emoji." The names beneath the announcement were all too familiar, Jake and Lila. My stomach twisted into knots as I read through the details. They'd concocted a whole night of festivities, complete with games, a dance floor, and even a dunk tank where everyone was eagerly encouraged to throw balls at their ex-friend's target. The laughter and glee of the event felt like a personal insult, a celebration of my humiliation. But something inside me began to shift. I could feel the simmering anger bubbling to the surface, morphing into something else, a fierce resolve that I had never experienced before. I clenched my fists, the intensity of my emotions igniting a flame within me that demanded to be unleashed. This was the turning point. I realized that I had to take back my narrative, not just for the sake of revenge, but for my own self-worth. This carnival wasn't just a party, it was a direct challenge to my existence, to my very identity. It was a clear signal that Lila and Jake thought they could dictate the terms of my life, casting me aside while they played the leading roles in the story of our high school. As the hours passed, a plan began to form in my mind, and the details unfolded with surprising clarity. I decided I wouldn't just show up to the carnival, I would make sure that they, and everyone else, saw me. I wanted my presence to reverberate like a thunderclap, a wake-up call to everyone who had written me off. I would no longer be Ruth the invisible girl, this time, I would step into the limelight, unafraid and unwavering. The transformation I had been cultivating in my martial arts class would now serve a dual purpose. I enlisted my fellow classmates who had been supportive during my journey, those who recognized my struggle instead of reveling in it. We agreed to turn the carnival into a showcase of strength and resilience. As I shared my plan, they lit up with enthusiasm, all eager to rally behind me. The night of the carnival arrived, and my heart pounded with a mix of excitement and nerves. I donned a sleek black outfit that exuded confidence and a subtle hint of defiance, a stark contrast to the pastels and playful attire that others wore. As I walked through the entrance, the sounds of laughter and chatter enveloped me, but I was no longer the girl hiding in the background. I was here to fight back. I made my way to the center of the carnival, where games and booths were set up, but instead of feeling small and unnecessary, I felt empowered, anchored by the support of my newfound friends. I watched Lila and Jake from a distance as they reveled in their spotlight, completely unaware of the storm brewing on the other side of the fairgrounds. In a bold move, I approached the dunk tank, the air crackling with anticipation. I could see the crowd laughing and pointing, waiting to see who would take the plunge next. The moment felt electric, charged with the energy of what was to come. I climbed onto the platform, heart racing but resolute. The crowd hushed, curiosity piqued as I grinned at the gathered classmates. "Hey everyone!" I called out, my voice steady and clear. I just wanted to say a few words. The murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd as I introduced myself, my heart soaring as I felt their eyes on me, not with derision this time, but with genuine interest. "Yeah, I'm Ruth. You might remember me as the girl in the background. I just want to show you all that I'm done hiding." I felt a surge of adrenaline as I aimed a pointed glance at Lila and Jake, who stood frozen in shock. I'm done letting anyone dictate my worth or my happiness. I might not have been the loudest voice in the room before, but tonight, I'm here to remind you all that I am more than a punchline, more than a shadow. I could see the flicker of surprise in Jake's eyes, a realization dawning on him that this was not going to go as he had planned. With a nod to my friends, who stood behind me with smiles of encouragement, I threw balls at the dunk tank target with all my might. The crowd erupted into cheers as the final ball struck the target and the splash echoed through the air. I felt exhilarated. But this was just the beginning. My mind raced with ideas, crafting a detailed revenge plan that was both clever and satisfying. It was time to turn the tables. 1. The carnival takeover. I had already made my entrance at the carnival dramatic, but now it was time to take full control of the event. I contacted the organizers ahead of time, leveraging my connections with the supportive classmates I had gathered. I suggested a surprise martial arts demonstration during the event's peak time, a showcase of strength that would draw in crowds and keep eyes off Lila and Jake. They agreed, excited to see what I had in store. 2. A training montage. In the weeks leading up to the carnival, my friends and I worked hard to prepare for the demonstration. We trained relentlessly, perfecting a series of choreographed moves that showcased not only our skills but also our unity. It became a powerful symbol of resilience and strength, turning my personal pain into a collective celebration of friendship and support. I wanted Jake and Lila to see just how much I had grown, but even more, I wanted them to realize that I would no longer be a pawn in their game. 3. The big reveal. On the night of the carnival, right after my dunk tank moment, I invited everyone to gather around for the martial arts demonstration. I could see Lila and Jake trying to brush it off as irrelevant, but I sensed their anxiety as I took center stage with my team. As the performance began, I could feel the crowd's excitement build. Each kick and punch was infused with the emotions I had bottled up for months. I glanced over at Lila and Jake during the performance, witnessing their expressions shift from smugness to discomfort. 4. The ultimate showdown. As the finale approached, I planned a special segment, one that would directly involve Lila and Jake. I called them out, feigning innocence with a bright smile. "Hey, Lila, Jake. Want to join us for a friendly match? It'll be fun." The crowd buzzed with anticipation as they glanced at each other, unsure of how to respond. They couldn't back down without looking cowardly, so they reluctantly agreed. 5. The match. The showdown began with a mock sparring session. I faced off against Lila first, all while maintaining a light-hearted banter that made the crowd laugh. I danced around her effortlessly, executing moves I had practiced relentlessly. Each block and dodge was laced with purpose. I wanted her to feel the intensity of her betrayal. I could see the panic in her eyes as I flipped over her, landing gracefully. The crowd erupted with cheers, and in that moment, I felt invincible. 6. The final punch. As I continued the mock match, it was time for the grand reveal. I had been orchestrating this all along. I had a friend record the entire demonstration, especially the moments that highlighted my transformation and strength. After wrapping up the match with a playful bow to Lila, I stepped back, catching my breath. "Thanks for the warm-up, Lila," I exclaimed, my voice ringing out. "But now, I think I'll show everyone something a little different." I motioned to my friend who held the camera. "Let's play back some highlights from my transformation over the past few months." The screen lit up with footage of my training sessions, the sweat, the tears, and the countless hours spent finding my strength and reclaiming my confidence. I watched as the crowd leaned in, captivated by the story unfolding before them. 7. The revelation. I turned to Jake, who stood awkwardly on the sidelines, unsure of how to react. "This is what you missed, Jake. I've fought back, not because of you, but for myself. I am not just Ruth, I am resilient, powerful, and I will not be defined by a kiss or a betrayal." The crowd erupted into applause, and I could feel the energy of support washing over me. As the footage ended, the crowd roared with approval. I could see the tension in Lila's expression, the realization that I had transformed from the background to the foreground of our shared story. I had not only reclaimed my power, but I had also stripped them of theirs, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. 8. The aftermath. After the carnival concluded, I received a flood of messages from my classmates. They praised my transformation, and those who had once laughed at my expense now expressed admiration for my strength. My phone buzzed nonstop, filled with requests to join my martial arts class, eager to learn from the girl they had once overlooked. Lila and Jake, however, as the cheers settled and the lights of the carnival began to twinkle like stars, my heart raced with adrenaline. The crowd was still abuzz from my demonstration, the energy electric and charged with excitement. It was time to put the final pieces of my revenge into motion, a cathartic culmination of everything I had worked towards. I spotted Lila and Jake huddled together at the edge of the festival grounds, their expressions a mixture of confusion and fear, as if they were suddenly grappling with the fact that I had become the unexpected protagonist in a story they thought they controlled. The power dynamics had shifted, and now it was my turn to seize the moment. "Hey, everyone," I shouted, my voice booming over the lingering echoes of laughter. I had everyone's attention, a spotlight on me that felt both exhilarating and daunting. "Thank you for joining me tonight. Now, I want to invite my dear friends Lila and Jake back to the center stage for a little something special." The shocked gasps from the crowd felt like a wave crashing over us, and I could see Lila's face turn pale as I beckoned them forth like a matador calling the bull. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, and now, it was finally coming to fruition. The collective breaths of my classmates hung in the air as their eyes darted between me and the two startled figures. "Come on, you can't back out now," I teased, feeling the rush of confidence surging through me. After all, we wouldn't want this night to end without a proper showdown, would we? Lila hesitated, glancing at Jake for reassurance, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She wore her bravado like a thin veil now, fraying at the edges. The laughter had died down, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake. Jake's usual swagger deflated, and I sensed the tension between us crackling like static electricity. With a dramatic flourish, I motioned for my friends to join me on the makeshift stage we had set up in front of the carnival games. "Let's show everyone what real teamwork looks like," I said with a determined smile. The crowd roared back to life, their excitement palpable. I felt like a gladiator before the Colosseum audience, and with every cheer, my resolve solidified. Lila and Jake reluctantly joined me, stepping into the spotlight as I put on my best show of confidence. Tonight is not just about games and laughter, it's about standing up for what's right. It's about recognizing that betrayal doesn't define us, and instead, it's our response that shapes our paths. As I spoke, I could see their discomfort growing. I had them right where I wanted them, and the crowd was rapt with attention, just waiting for the unexpected twist to unfold. So, in the spirit of fun and friendship, I continued, "How about a little friendly competition?" The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, eagerly anticipating the rivalry brewing before them. I felt the thrill of anticipation coursing through me. This was my moment, the ultimate poetic justice that would not only showcase my growth but also hold Lila and Jake accountable for their actions. Let's go with a series of challenges, I proposed, grinning as I prepared to unleash my plan. I challenge you both to a series of games, a friendly spar, a dunk tank rotation, and finally, a game of knowledge where we all get to ask questions about our history together. Lila shot me a look filled with disbelief, her bravado waning. I could almost hear her thoughts racing. She never expected this. Jake's default smirk had faded, replaced with a furrowed brow that hinted at his dread. You think you can take us down, Ruth? He spat, trying to regain some semblance of control. Absolutely, I replied, my tone unwavering. Let's see whose friendship is stronger. Yours or mine? The crowd rallied behind me, chanting my name, and I could feel the momentum shift squarely in my favor. With every cheer, I felt an exhilarating rush of power. I was no longer the quiet girl, the background shadow. Tonight, I was the main event. The first challenge commenced, a sparring match between Lila and me, a culmination of tension that had been building for months. As we stepped across from each other, I could feel my heart thundering in my chest, but this time, it was not out of fear, it was anticipation. All right, Lila, let's do this. I called out, my voice steady. The crowd fell silent, and in that moment, it was just the two of us. We circled each other, and I could see the flick. The sparring match was a whirlwind of emotion. Every punch, every block, every swift movement was laced with the weight of our shared history. The crowd was on their feet, gasping and cheering as the rivalry unfolded before them. Lila, fueled by the remnants of her bravado, came at me with vigor. I could see the desperation behind her strikes. She was trying to reclaim her status, to prove me wrong. But with each exchange, I felt the dominance shift in my favor. When the match concluded, I stood panting, adrenaline coursing through my veins, while Lila stumbled backward, a mixture of surprise and frustration painted on her flushed cheeks. The cheers of my classmates rang in my ears like a victorious anthem. I had not just won the match, I had won a moment of redemption. Jake stepped in for his turn, a confident smirk plastered on his face. He thought he could outmaneuver me, but as I faced him, I felt a renewed sense of strength. This time, I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for every girl who had ever felt overlooked and betrayed. With every move, I was reminded of the countless hours I had spent training, of the determination that had helped me rise from the ashes of my heartbreak. I dodged his attempts with ease and delivered swift counterattacks. The crowd roared with each successful strike, and I could see the tide shifting beneath Jake's feet. His bravado was melting away, revealing the uncertainty that lurked beneath. As I finally pinned him down in the final moments, the cheers erupted into a thunderous applause, drowning out the noise of the past, the taunts, the laughter, the betrayal. I had risen to the occasion, but it wasn't just about defeating them, it was about reclaiming my narrative. It was about proving to myself that I was worth more than their fleeting amusement. But the night wasn't over. The dunk tank challenge followed, and as I gestured for Lila to take the first shot, I could see the unease creeping back into her demeanor. I stood before the crowd, bravery emanating from me like a beacon. Take your best shot, Lila. I called out, my voice mixed with both challenge and encouragement. Lila stepped up to throw, but instead of the confidence she had worn earlier, there was uncertainty. She missed, the ball splatting against the side of the tank with a wet smack. Laughter erupted, but I could see the pain behind her eyes. The second throw was no better, the ball ricocheted harmlessly away. As she stepped back, the crowd began to pity her, the laughter morphing into a sympathetic murmur. Looks like you've lost your edge since that kiss. I called out playfully, even as my heart ached for her. I realized in that moment that while I had fought hard for my own redemption, I didn't revel in her humiliation. Instead, I hoped she could learn from this, just as I had. When it was my turn, the stakes felt higher than ever. The crowd grew quiet as I took my place on the platform, Lila and Jake standing back, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. I took a deep breath, focusing on the target. With the first throw, I hit the mark, and the splash went over the audience, eliciting shrieks and laughter. With each consecutive throw, I felt lighter, my heart soaring with every successful hit. Finally, it was Jake's turn. As he took his shots, missing one after another, I could see the realization dawning on his face that he had underestimated me. The cheers continued, but I could sense a shift. The crowd began to question their perception of him, and I knew that this was not just about me reclaiming my power, it was about redefining the narrative that had long been woven around us all. The carnival culminated with the knowledge challenge, where I asked questions about our friendship, our shared memories. I turned the tables, highlighting moments Lila and Jake had never acknowledged, the times I had stood by their side, the times I had supported them. The crowd began to shift in their perspective, realizing that I had been more than just a shadow, I had been a friend, an ally, someone who deserved better. As the night wound down, I stood at the center of the carnival, surrounded by my friends, their faces shining with pride. The atmosphere was electric, filled with the energy of newfound respect, and I could finally breathe again. I had transformed not just my own story but had shifted the narrative of how others perceived me. In the days that followed, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The messages from classmates continued to pour in, with many expressing admiration for my strength.
The echo of the cafeteria buzzed around me, a cacophony of laughter and casual chatter that felt like a distant storm, an unsettling backdrop to the reality I was drowning in. I sat at a corner table, the smell of greasy pizza and stale fries wafting through the air, clinging to my skin like a fog I couldn't shake off. It was just another ordinary lunch hour, yet my heart was racing, a drumroll for the chaos that was about to unfold. I wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. The palpable tension had settled over our small school like a thick fog, thick enough to choke out even the brightest of smiles. My friends, Clara, with her wild curls and infectious laughter, and Mia, who could turn any dull moment into an adventure, seemed to sense the dark cloud looming. They shot concerned glances my way, but I kept my head down, a shield against their worry. Today, the stakes felt higher than ever, and it wasn't just me, it was all of us. A month ago, the principal, Mr. Thompson, had clapped his hands together, disrupting the usual drone of adolescent noise. "We need to talk about grades," he'd said, his voice booming like thunder. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over our class, landing like a predator on its prey. He had laid out an ultimatum: shape up or lose our honors program. It didn't just threaten our GPA, it threatened our futures, our dreams of college, and the hard work we'd poured into our education. The very foundation of who we were as students was being yanked out from under us. That day, he had called me out directly. "You think your grades will earn you a spot in that fancy university?" His words sliced through the air, sharp and mocking. In front of everyone. The laughter that followed felt like hot embers on my skin, each chuckle igniting a fire of humiliation that threatened to consume me. I had always been the model student, the one who strived to do everything right. But in that moment, I felt like a failure, exposed and vulnerable. And then there were the teachers, who seemed to have turned into Mr. Thompson's pawns, enforcing his whims with a frightening zeal. Mrs. Green, my math teacher, once my biggest supporter, now treated me with a clipped impatience, as if my mere presence was an affront to her authority. Every time she called me out in class, it was another jab at my confidence, each word coating my dreams in a bitter layer of doubt. They thought they held all the power, Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Green, and the other enforcers of this cruel game, but they didn't know me. They didn't know that beneath my anxious exterior simmered a fire that roared with a quiet intensity. Threatening my education? They'd soon find out it wasn't just students they could play with. With each passing day, the shadows of revenge danced in my mind. I had never considered myself vengeful, but when the very essence of my future was put on the line, something inside me snapped. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them push me around. No, I would show them the consequences of their actions. A reckoning was brewing, and as I glanced down at my untouched lunch, I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest, the anticipation of what was to come curling like smoke in the air around me. Little did they know, their jobs would soon become collateral damage in my quest for justice. The first crack in the facade appeared a week after Mr. Thompson's proclamation. I had stayed late to study, hoping that drowning myself in textbooks would somehow drown out the chaos of my thoughts. As I packed my bag, I overheard hushed voices drifting from the staff lounge, their tones conspiratorial, laced with disdain. Can you believe some of these kids? They think they can just coast through this program, Mrs. Green said, her voice harsh and judgmental. They need a wake-up call. A little tough love never hurt anyone, Mr. Thompson shot back, his tone dripping with derision. If we don't crack down now, we might as well hand them their diplomas on a silver platter. It's not like they've earned it. My heart sank. Anger flared in my chest, burning like acid. Tough love? This was punishment veiled as education, a cruel mockery of what teaching should be. I felt the deep stab of disbelief. How could they be so blind to the effort we put in? I thought back to the nights I spent hunched over my desk, fighting exhaustion to finish assignments, and the weekends that slid by while my peers partied. Confusion began to twist my emotions into a tight knot. Was I really the failure they painted me to be? Had my peers, the ones who shared laughter and stress, secretly conspired with them to undermine me? The thought twisted like a knife in my gut. How could they judge my commitment when they didn't see the sacrifices I made? Over the next few weeks, the changes in the classroom became glaringly apparent. The atmosphere morphed from one of camaraderie to an oppressive battlefield. I watched as my classmates' faces drained of color, their shoulders slumping under the weight of mounting stress. One by one, they ceased to be the spirited friends I loved, they transformed into shadows of themselves, each defeated glance mirroring my own. When I struggled with a math problem in front of the class and Mrs. Green blasted me for wasting everyone's time, the laughter that erupted felt like the final straw. I could feel their eyes on me, not with support but with judgment. I wanted to scream, to shake them all out of their stupor and demand they see me, the real me, the one who fought tooth and nail to be where I was. Why couldn't they see that I was trying? My anger morphed into resentment, bubbling beneath the surface as I began to see them for what they truly were, obstacles to my future. As I watched Mr. Thompson and the teachers push us harder, laying down more draconian rules, I felt a swelling rage rise up within me, a tide ready to engulf everything in its path. They were the ones who betrayed us. They had taken an institution meant to foster growth and turned it into a prison of despair. My dreams were being suffocated under their heavy-handed policies, and I'd be damned if I let them go unpunished. I found myself daydreaming about revenge at the most mundane moments, while washing the dishes, during a dull history lecture, or even as I lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling. The more trapped I felt, the more vivid these fantasies became. What would happen if I exposed their hypocrisy? What if I recorded their conversations, painted them as tyrants in the eyes of the school board? These thoughts swirled around in my mind like a whirlwind, enticing and terrifying all at once. One afternoon, while I was sifting through my notes in the library, I heard someone near my table. Their snickers echoed like a haunting melody, twisting deeper into my gut as I recognized the voices. It was Jake and Sarah, two of the more popular kids in school, who'd given in to the atmosphere of dread that was suffocating us all. As I peeked over my textbook, I caught a glimpse of them huddled together, their whispers like venom in the air. "Did you see how she bombed that math test?" "Total embarrassment," Jake said, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Yeah, I can't believe she thought she'd get into college like that." "Maybe they should just lower the bar for everyone," Sarah chuckled, her laughter sharp. I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me, a crushing weight that threatened to pull me under. How had it come to this? My education, the very thing I had poured my heart and soul into, was now fodder for their ridicule. I pressed my palms against the table, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. The isolation closed in around me, a suffocating blanket that wrapped tighter with each word they uttered. As the days turned into weeks, that isolation deepened. Clara and Mia had started to drift, caught in the web of their own insecurities. It hurt to see them pulled away, as if they were being pulled into the depths of the very system that was crushing me. They'd throw me sympathetic glances, but their words were scarce. It was as if they were afraid of catching the fallout of my troubles, and their silence spoke volumes. I felt the distance growing, a chasm widening between us, and it gnawed at my heart like a relentless predator. The final blow came one dreary Friday afternoon. I had been struggling with a project for weeks, pouring all my energy into crafting something that would finally earn me a glimmer of respect from Mrs. Green. She had promised feedback, a moment of hope amidst the rising tides of despair. But when I nervously approached her desk, my project cradled in my trembling hands, Her eyes flicked over it dismissively. "Is this the best you can do, Emily?" she asked, her voice cool and cutting, filled with the kind of disappointment that felt like nails on a chalkboard. "You really thought this was sufficient for our standards?" I had barely begun to respond when she added, "Maybe you should consider a different path if this level of work is what you produce." The laughter of my peers bubbled up again, a cruel chorus that sang of my failures. I felt the heat of tears welling up in my eyes but refused to let them spill over. I turned on my heel, fighting the urge to break down, feeling the weight of her words crushing my spirit. It wasn't just humiliation, it was a shattering of trust. Trust in the system, trust in myself, and trust in those who claimed to support us. That evening, I lay in bed, the ceiling blurring beneath a haze of anger and hopelessness. I replayed the day's events over and over. Each time, it felt like a punch to the gut. I had only wanted to prove myself, yet they had turned my ambition into a weapon against me, wielded by those I had once admired. It felt so grotesquely unfair. My heart raced as I plotted my course of action. I would not be crushed without a fight. I began to research ways to expose the hypocrisy of our educational leaders. I imagined recording their conversations, collecting evidence of their callousness. There had to be a way to turn the night drag drearily on, my mind racing like a runaway train filled with anger, despair, and a deep, burning desire for justice. The buzz of the harsh fluorescent light above my bed felt like a spotlight on my turmoil, illuminating the depths of my frustration. Just as I sat up, clutching my pillow and staring into the void of my darkened room, an impulsive thought seized me, electrifying my senses. What if I turned the tables? What if I used their own tactics against them? The idea flashed in my mind like a lightning strike, igniting a smoldering fire that had been hidden beneath my surface. I could record them. I could expose them. The thought sent shivers down my spine, both exhilarating and terrifying. In that moment, clarity washed over me like a tidal wave, sweeping away the debris of doubt and fear that had weighed me down for weeks. I wasn't just an anxious student anymore, I was a fighter, an unexpected warrior ready to battle for my future. They had underestimated me, but I would orchestrate a plan that would lay bare their hypocrisy and cruelty for all to see. I envisioned gathering my classmates, rallying them with the truth of our shared struggle. They needed to know they were not alone, that our fight was collective. But first, I had to gather the ammunition. I needed to be careful, stealthy, like a hunter stalking its prey. My heart raced with a mix of fear and adrenaline as I began to imagine how this could unfold. The next day, I entered school with a newfound resolve. My usual trepidation was replaced by a sense of purpose, each step echoing with the weight of my decision. I took my seat in math class, and as Mrs. Green began her lecture, my mind whirred with possibilities. My phone, innocuous and unassuming in my pocket, became my secret weapon. I could record her, capture her disdain on video, the moments she belittled us, the times she chastised us publicly. If I could catch her in action, it would be the evidence needed to bring her down. But that wasn't enough. I had to consider Mr. Thompson, whose grand schemes threatened not just my education but the futures of all my peers. He was the puppeteer pulling the strings, and I vowed to unveil the strings for everyone to see. I would document his arrogance, his condescension, those moments when he spoke to us as if we were mere cockroaches beneath his boot. As I plotted my revenge, the memory of Clara and Mia tugged at my conscience, reminding me of the loyalty we once shared. I had to include them, they deserved to be part of the reckoning. I began drafting a message in my mind, an invitation for them to rally together. We had been through so much, and if we had each other's backs, we would be unstoppable. But the final straw came later that week, as I sat in the library, my laptop open to a blank document. I was supposed to be working on an assignment, but my heart wasn't in it. Instead, I eavesdropped on a discussion between Mr. Thompson and another teacher, their laughter echoing down the aisles like shards of glass. "I swear, they're all just lazy," Mr. Thompson said, his voice thick with disdain. "A little pressure is good for them, some motivation. They'll thank us later. Or not," he added with a dismissive chuckle, "but it won't matter when they're failing." Something snapped inside me. Their laughter, as I sat on the wooden library chair, heart racing and fists clenched, I realized I had to act swiftly and decisively. The vision of vengeance crystallized into a step-by-step plan, pulsating with a sense of urgency. This wasn't just about me anymore, this was about every student they had belittled, every dream they had trampled on. I would turn their power against them and expose their hypocrisy. Here's how it would unfold. My first task was to capture evidence of their cruel tactics and attitudes. If I was going to expose the administrators, I needed their own words as weapons. I started taking my phone to classes, discreetly recording snippets of Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Green's lectures, particularly when they called out students in cutting tones or mocked our efforts, potential obstacles. I needed to remain undetected, any hint of suspicion and they would tighten their grip on us even more. I had to keep my phone discreetly positioned on my lap, using Bluetooth headphones to listen while maintaining the illusion of paying attention. I also had to avoid drawing the attention of fellow students who might be alarmed by my actions. With a collection of recordings and a passion ignited in my heart, I knew I couldn't do this alone. I reached out to Clara and Mia, piecing together our shared frustrations and fears. I asked them to join me in collecting their own evidence, encouraging them to document their experiences, too. How I did it, I set up a secret group chat, sharing my plan and urging them to record their interactions with teachers or any moments of humiliation. "We're not alone in this," I texted them, "and together we can make a difference." Potential obstacles. Trust was fragile. Clara and Mia hesitated, fearing repercussions. I had to reassure them that this wasn't just about revenge, it was about standing up for what was right. I filled them with a sense of justice, painting our shared experience into a rallying cry. With enough evidence from our recordings, I decided it was time to compile everything into a cohesive document. I began categorizing the clips, instances of bullying, mockery, and disdainful remarks that painted a clear picture of the toxic environment. I even began drafting a letter addressed to the school board, outlining our experiences and the detrimental impact of their actions on students' mental health and education. Potential obstacles. I had to ensure everything was factual, avoiding exaggeration. I knew the school administration would scrutinize our claims, looking for any signs of dishonesty. I had to maintain integrity while presenting our case. As I began to build a compelling case, I realized that I needed more support. My classmates were the heart of this movement. I reached out to them in secret, organizing a meeting in the back of the library under the pretense of studying for exams. How I did it, I spread the word through whispers, careful not to include anyone I didn't trust. The day of the meeting, I stood before a small group of classmates, sharing my vision and showing them my recordings. "We have the power to change this," I exclaimed, my voice trembling with excitement. "We can show them they can't treat us this way anymore." Potential obstacles. The day had finally arrived. My heart raced as the school's auditorium loomed before me, a cavernous space filled with rows of students and faculty. The anticipation hung in the air like a charged storm, crackling with tension. Today, I would unveil the truth, no more hiding, no more silence. Clara and Mia stood by my side, their expressions a mix of anxiety and fierce determination, mirroring my own resolve. We had spent countless hours crafting our presentation, piecing together our recordings into a razor-sharp narrative that exposed the callousness of Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Green. The entire student body buzzed with curiosity, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The lights dimmed, and the spotlight cut across the crowd, landing on us like an omen. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, the microphone feeling foreign in my hand. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady but my heart hammering in my chest. "We wanted to talk about something that's affecting all of us, the culture of fear and humiliation pervading our school." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I caught sight of Mr. Thompson sitting at the front, the corners of his mouth twitching in irritation. His disapproval was palpable, a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. I pressed on, flipping open my laptop to reveal our meticulously edited video. The first clip played, a recording of Mr. Thompson laughing derisively at a student who had dared to voice her concerns about the pressure we were under. The laughter echoed around the auditorium, but it was laced with unease, an insidious reminder of the power dynamics at play. I glanced at Clara and Mia, who nodded, their resolve fueling my own. The next clip showed Mrs. Green, her sharp tongue cutting through a nervous student's explanation of his project. "This is completely unacceptable," she scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're representing our school, not your personal comedy show." Gasps filled the room. The tide was turning, and I could see it in the faces of my classmates: shock, disbelief, and an awakening sense of solidarity. They were starting to realize that they weren't alone all along. We were all victims of a system that thrived on intimidation and ridicule. As we moved through our evidence, I felt the weight of their gazes piercing through me, a collective force that fueled my courage. I could see Mr. Thompson's jaw tightening, his expression morphing from amusement to indignation. He was losing control, and it felt intoxicating. The final clip loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon. It was a recording of my private confrontation with Mrs. Green, the moment when she had dismissed my efforts as insufficient and hinted that I should consider a different path. I could hear my own voice trembling but resolute. "This isn't about giving up. It's about fighting for what we deserve." The playback echoed through the auditorium, and the silence that followed was deafening. The weight of my words hung in the air, a challenge thrown at the feet of authority. I saw Mrs. Green's face turn from irritation to disbelief. She couldn't comprehend that a student had dared to stand against her. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted. Students shifted in their seats, murmurs of agreement fluttering like wings. My classmates were no longer passive observers, they were awakening from a slumber of despondency. I felt an electric current surge through the crowd, a collective heartbeat growing stronger. "I don't want to be belit." The auditorium erupted into chaos. Students rose from their seats, a wave of disbelief and outrage crashing over the stagnant atmosphere that had swallowed us for so long. I could hear the murmurs of agreement, the shouts of defiance growing louder, like a battle cry echoing deep within the walls of the school. And there, in the front row, Mr. Thompson was no longer the towering figure of authority. He was a cornered animal, glaring at us with palpable fury and confusion. Clara and Mia squeezed my hands, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. We had done it. We had dared to stand up, to fight back, and suddenly, we were not just individuals trapped in a toxic system, we were part of a movement. As the crowd grew restless, I could feel the tide turning against our oppressors. Students began chanting, "Enough is enough." The sounds bounced off the walls, filling the space with a power that was intoxicating. I had never felt more alive, more connected to my peers. It was a moment of collective empowerment, the realization that we were not alone in our struggles. But with the cheers came consequences. In the days that followed, the fallout from our rebellion was swift and severe. Mr. Thompson, in a desperate attempt to retain control, called an all-staff meeting that resulted in a palpable tension hanging over the school. Teachers who had once been supportive now cast wary glances in the hallways, unsure of where their loyalty should lie. Whispers of retaliation swirled around us like storm clouds, tainting the air with the scent of fear. Mrs. Green, particularly enraged by our insubordination, took it upon herself to make an example of us. She began to nitpick at our assignments, handing back graded papers with scathing comments that felt more personal than constructive. The high marks we had once been accustomed to became a distant memory, replaced by grades that seemed to reflect her contempt rather than our efforts. Clara and Mia struggled to cope with the fallout, their spirits dimming under the weight of the backlash. I watched helplessly as they withdrew into themselves, their laughter fading into whispers of doubt. "Maybe we went too far," Clara said one evening over a bowl of popcorn, her brow furrowing with worry. "I mean, what if this really affects our college applications?" I felt a pang of guilt pierce through my resolve. Was it worth the price we were paying? Were we really fighting for freedom, or had we simply unleashed chaos? But the shadow of my own dreams haunted me, a constant reminder that our rebellion was fueled by a deep desire for justice, a longing to reclaim our education from the clutches of ignorance. The final blow came when we received an email from the school board announcing a review of the honors program. The letter was a chilling reminder that our actions had consequences. It accused us of disruptive behavior and hinted at the potential for the program to be restructured entirely. It was as if we had unleashed a storm that threatened to uproot everything we had fought for. In a fleeting moment of darkness, I felt the weight of regret pressing down on my chest. Had our fight truly been worth it? My heart raced as I considered the very real possibility of losing the futures we had fought so hard to protect. Were we just pawns in a game that would forever alter the course of our education? But then, one afternoon, amid the lingering doubt and tension, my phone pinged with a new message. It was Mia, her typically bright emoji replaced with a resolute determination. We need to keep.
You know that feeling when you're trapped in a nightmare, yet every morning, you wake up to find it was just a dream, and the world feels normal again? That's how my life felt for the last 2 years, like a waking nightmare where I was both the prisoner and the spectator. The routine of scrolling through my phone, listening to friends laugh, sharing stories over coffee, all felt like empty gestures, a facade I wore like a tight-fitting mask while chaos brewed beneath. It was in the heart of our small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone, that my life took a sharp turn into darkness. I was just a regular girl, Emma, 25, a freelance graphic designer, addicted to the smell of fresh paint and the thrill of creating something beautiful. My days were filled with colors, textures, and my beloved cat, Whiskers, who seemed to sense the weight of my heart even before I did. But all of that changed the moment Lily stepped back into my life. Lily, my childhood best friend turned trusted confidant turned treacherous foil, was nothing short of a tornado. She swept in with her whirlwind charm, her laughter echoing like music, intoxicating and contagious. She had a way of lighting up a room, drawing people into her orbit as if she held the sun in her hands. For years, I stood by her side, our bond seemingly unbreakable, until I learned that loyalty, in her eyes, was a mere stepping stone on her path to success. It began quietly, whispers in the shadows of our friendship, hidden glances, casual lies. I brushed them off, convinced I was paranoid. She would never do that to me, I thought, clinging to the memories of our carefree youth, tossing our hair back as we danced in the rain, dreaming of futures filled with endless possibilities. But every smile she wore began to feel like a mask, and every compliment she offered dripped with insincerity. The day my world shattered was a rainy Thursday, the kind where the sky weeps for the lost. I was hunched over my laptop, the sound of rain pattering against the window blending with the soft hum of my favorite playlist. A message slid onto my screen, unsuspecting, from a mutual friend. Did you hear what Lily did? In that moment, the air thickened, suffocating me as I read the words again and again, each syllable carving deeper into my gut. Betrayal. Unforgivable betrayal. She had taken my designs, my ideas, everything I'd poured my heart into, and claimed them as her own. In a moment, the laughter faded, the colors dulled, and the world I had known twisted into something sinister. The betrayal stung, yes, but it was the realization of her true nature that felt like a knife twisting in my back. She thought she had me. But I was more than just the girl she toyed with, I was a storm waiting to break free. Now, I sit here, ready to embrace the tempest within me. I want you to know that revenge doesn't always mean fire and fury. Sometimes, it's the silent, calculated precision of a mind that has awakened. The clock is ticking, and change is coming. What she's about to find out is that I've been watching, waiting for my moment to strike back. It's time to show her that she never really knew me at all. The days following that fateful Thursday morphed into a blur of disbelief and devastation. I felt like a ghost, floating through life, unseen, unheard. I remember the conversations I had with myself, the argument playing out in my mind like an unending loop. How could she? My heart raced, pumping indignation through my veins. I replayed every interaction we'd shared, seeking clues hidden in her laughter, signs of the duplicity lurking beneath her charming facade. But all I could see was the girl I had loved like a sister, the one who'd confided her dreams to me, who had promised to stand by my side no matter what. Maybe I misunderstood, I would whisper to Whiskers, cradling him in my arms as if he could mend my broken heart. This can't be real. But reality has a way of crashing in, hard and unyielding. She didn't just steal my designs, she stole my trust, my self-esteem, and my perception of who I was. As the days wore on, I felt my anger morph into something darker. The more I thought about it, the more clarity emerged. She thrived on the chaos she created. I couldn't shake the image of her reveling in her success, filled with glee as she presented my work to our friends, smiling as if she had birthed those ideas herself. I envisioned those moments, her eyes sparkling with excitement, the way she laughed, her voice bubbling over with triumph at the very expense of my heartbreak. Why didn't I see it? I cried out one night, my voice cracking as I scrolled through her social media posts, each one a reminder of what she had done. Her glowing self-portraits, her exaggerated captions celebrating her newfound fame in the design world, all built on the back of my labor. It felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, gasping for air, yet suffocated by the weight of her deception. I began to dissect the timeline of our friendship. The moments I had thought were genuine were now tainted. I could almost hear her voice ringing in my ears, "You're so talented, Emma. You deserve to be recognized." How ironic, now that I knew she had been working behind my back all along. The thought of her feigning support, all while plotting my professional demise, ignited a fire in me. How dare she underestimate me? It was at that moment of despair that clarity struck like lightning. I realized I couldn't allow this betrayal to define me. I was not just a victim, I was a creator, an architect of my own fate. If she thought she had me cornered, I would show her just how wrong she was. So, I hatched a plan. An intricate tapestry woven with threads of strategy and patience. I would reclaim my power, brick by brick. My first step was to gather evidence. I meticulously documented every design I had created, every email that confirmed my authorship, every conversation that highlighted my ideas. I became a detective in my own story, lurking in the shadows of my former life, collecting the pieces that would serve as my armor in the war to come. The anger transformed into a cool, calculated resolve. I envisioned confronting her, the way the balance of power would shift as I laid out my evidence. The thought of her face going pale, her charming smile fading into confusion and fear sent a thrill down my spine. She thinks she's invincible, untouchable. But she doesn't realize that the person she betrayed has been watching, preparing for this moment as the days turned into weeks. The plan that once flickered like a spark began to flame into something tangible. Yet, everything began to unravel in ways I never expected, intensifying the emotional turmoil that coursed through my veins. My world felt like a ticking time bomb, and every interaction with Lily would send shockwaves through my chest, reminding me of her betrayal. I remember one afternoon, walking into our usual coffee shop, the familiar scent of freshly brewed espresso wrapping around me like a warm embrace. My heart raced as I approached the counter, scanning the room for her. There she was, seated at our corner table, surrounded by a group of admirers, each word she spoke blossoming into laughter as they leaned closer, drawn to her magnetic charm. I felt the heat rise within me, churning with a mix of anger and humiliation. This was our place, I thought bitterly. But now, it felt like a stage, and she was its star, basking in the spotlight of my former warmth. As I turned to leave, I heard her voice, laced with false sweetness, "Emma. Come join us." I hesitated, my pulse quickening. She's trying to bait me. The very thought sent chills down my spine. I could sense the amusement in the way she called my name, her friend's curious eyes darting back and forth as if anticipating a showdown. But I held my ground, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, muttering something about having plans. As I stepped outside, each breath felt like jagged glass in my throat, rough and unforgiving. Those small moments became my daily struggle. Each time I ran into her, either at social gatherings or simply passing by on the street, it felt like a reminder of my defeat. She wore her newfound success like a crown, flaunting it with a carelessness that stung. The isolation crept in. Friends began to distance themselves, torn between loyalty to me and the allure of her charm. "You guys should just work it out," they'd say, as if they couldn't see the chasm of betrayal that had formed between us. I felt their dismissive words ricochet through my mind as if I were the one being unreasonable. One evening, I received a text from Lisa, one of our mutual friends. "I didn't want to say anything, but I was at this event last night where Lily presented her designs, and she mentioned you in passing. She said you were just a stepping stone in her journey." I stared at my phone in disbelief, the words blurring as tears threatened to spill. It was as if every ounce of dignity I had left was stripped away, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. I thought I was stronger than this, I berated myself, but the humiliation felt like a shackle, binding me to my pain. I couldn't escape the feeling of being isolated, of being betrayed not only by her but by the people I once called friends, who failed to recognize the gravity of her actions. The more they celebrated her, the more I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that no longer welcomed me. The weight of it all became unbearable. My art, once my sanctuary, turned into a battleground. I'd sit at my desk for hours, staring blankly at the canvas, my creativity stifled by a thick fog of resentment and despair. I could hear her voice echoing in my mind, taunting me. "Look at you now, Emma. You're nothing without me." I was losing trust, and it was a quiet night, the kind where the world felt shrouded in a blanket of stillness, and the only sound was the rhythmic pitter-patter of rain against my window, a natural lullaby that usually lulled my tortured mind to a place of solace. But that night, it sat heavy in my chest, too loud, too insistent. I had been scrolling through social media yet again, staring numbly at another one of Lily's posts, glorifying her latest triumph, her smile as bright as the neon lights that illuminated her carefully curated life. She had just been featured in an article spotlighting young designers to watch, and I felt the familiar pang of hurt flare up as I read the words. Innovative and bold, they referred to her, and I couldn't help but think of the countless hours I spent brainstorming and drafting designs she would ultimately claim as her own. I turned off my phone, tossing it aside as if it were a toxic object, and tried to breathe through the knot forming in my stomach. But the darkness loomed, suffocating me with a heavy blanket of rage and humiliation. Why can't I just move on? I asked myself, the question feeling like a cruel taunt echoing back at me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that I wanted to move on, I wanted justice. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, the pain she inflicted on me. That was when the final straw shattered my fragile resolve. It was late, and I found myself curled up on the couch with whiskers purring softly beside me. The television flickered in the background, a mindless show that I couldn't fully focus on. Suddenly, there was a knock at my door, unexpected and jarring. I glanced at the clock, it was nearly 10. I opened it to find Lisa standing there, her expression serious and urgent. "Emma, we need to talk. It's about Lily." My heart raced, anticipation and dread mixing into an intoxicating cocktail of emotions. "What's happened?" I asked, ushering her in and closing the door behind us. As she spoke, I felt the walls of my reality begin to crumble, her words steady but heavy. "I just got off the phone with a mutual friend who works at the magazine. Apparently, Lily has been spreading lies about you to anyone who will listen. She's claiming that you were never a significant part of her creative process, that you were merely a helper, always in her shadow. She's trying to erase you from the story of her success." I could feel my stomach drop, like I had been punched hard in the gut. She's really doing it, I thought. She was continuing to rewrite our history, consolidating her power by poisoning the minds of those who had once loved me too. In that moment, all the hurt, the confusion, and the betrayal coalesced into a single, crystalline thought: this has gone too far. I looked at Lisa, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and resolve. I can't just let her do this to me. I need to show her that I'm not the weak link she thinks I am. Lisa's eyes widened, and she reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "What are you planning?" I could feel the shift within me, something had awakened. The fear that had plagued me for months faded as clarity took its place. No more playing the victim. No more letting her define my narrative. The storm brewing inside me wasn't just a passing squall, it was a full. I sat there, heart pounding, the storm within me crashing against the walls of my mind as my thoughts coalesced into an intricate plan. I needed to be methodical, careful. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was determined to make it a masterpiece. The very first step: gather my evidence, not just for vindication, but to expose the truth in a way that would reverberate throughout our small town. 1. Collect evidence. I went into detective mode, compiling every email, text message, and sketch that proved my contributions to our projects. I created a digital portfolio that showcased my original designs, complete with timestamps and the context behind each creation. I wanted to create an undeniable narrative of my work, one that she could not twist or deny. Every piece would serve as a testament to the truth, my truth. 2. Enlist allies. I reached out to a few trusted friends who had been with us since the beginning of our friendship. I shared everything with them, emphasizing the importance of their support. I needed them to remember the moments when I'd shared my ideas and designs before Lily ever had a chance to claim them. By reminding them of our shared past, I could turn them into my witnesses, people who would stand by my side when the time came to confront her. 3. Study Lily's moves. It was crucial to understand Lily's routines, her social circles, and how she presented herself to the world. I began attending the same events she did, lurking in the background, observing how she interacted with others and the narratives she spun. With each passing day, I took notes. The more I understood her strategies, the better positioned I would be to dismantle them. Knowledge is power, after all. 4. Create a counter-narrative. Inspired by the materials I collected, I started to craft my own narrative. I began writing a blog, one that highlighted the importance of originality in art and the value of collaboration. I framed it loosely around my experiences of betrayal in the creative world, embedding subtle references to my journey with Lily. My blog would start getting traction, creating a community of supporters who resonated with my story. 5. The art show reveal. The pièce de résistance of my plan was the idea of hosting an art show. I reached out to a local gallery and booked a date, planning to unveil my collection. But this show wouldn't just be an exhibition of my work, it would be the stage for my revenge. I decided to release a limited edition of prints that illustrated the designs she had stolen, each one meticulously crafted to tell my story, from conceptual sketches to final pieces, spotlighting my creativity and hard work. 6. Public announcement. I planned the moment of revelation carefully. The night of my art show would coincide with the reveal of Lily's next big project launch, which I had learned through the grapevine. As she basked in her glory, I would make my entrance, boldly announcing my collection while subtly highlighting the designs Lily had stolen. Through a speech woven with poignant insights, I would ensure that everyone present understood the truth. I envisioned the shift in the room when the audience connected the dots, her laughter fading as whispers erupted in disbelief around us. 7. Prepare for backlash. I knew that Lily wouldn't take this lying down. I braced myself for her attempts to discredit me or to flip the narrative. I prepped myself for confrontations, collecting testimonies from friends who witnessed her betrayal. I would be ready to counter any lies with facts. I also secured a short video the night of the art show had arrived, and the energy thrummed through the air like an electric current, crackling with anticipation. I stood backstage, my heart racing as I peered through the curtains at the crowd filling the gallery. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers poured in, all there to witness the unveiling of my collection. But amidst them, I was acutely aware of one looming presence, Lily. She had been buzzing about the space, her laugh echoing like a siren call, as she flaunted her own designs that had been birthed from my stolen ideas. I could almost sense the magnetic shift in the room as she entered. Her confidence radiated like a beacon, drawing people closer, eager to drink from her well of charm. I swallowed hard, forcing down the tidal wave of nausea that threatened to engulf me. She thought she had me. But tonight, I would reclaim my narrative. The moment I stepped out onto the stage, the audience's chatter died down, eyes locking onto me as if I were the sun breaking through a cloudy sky. I took a deep breath, feeling every heartbeat reverberate through me. The spotlight was bright, but I welcomed it. The warmth that had once terrified me now felt like a cloak of power. Welcome, everyone, I began, my voice steady, cutting through the silence. Tonight, I'm excited to share not just my art, but also a story. A story about creativity, trust, and the importance of authenticity. I could see Lily in the crowd, her smile faltering as she registered the shift in my tone. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Good. With every word, I felt my resolve harden. I unveiled my collection piece by piece, each design a brushstroke of my truth. These prints represent not just my artistic vision but my journey through betrayal, I declared, gesturing to the first piece, a vibrant explosion of colors that embodied my pain and resilience. These are the designs that once belonged to me, the ideas that were stolen and repurposed as someone else's innovative triumph. Gasps rippled through the audience as they turned to look at Lily, who stood frozen, the blood draining from her face. I could feel my pulse quicken, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, urging me on. This was it, the moment of poetic justice. The very foundation of artistry is rooted in honesty, I continued, my voice unwavering as I pointed to the next piece, an intricate sketch that mirrored my despair. When you betray that honesty, you not only steal a person's work, you strip them of their identity. The tension in the room thickened, a palpable buzz of disbelief hanging in the air. I reveled in it, every gasp, every murmur. I had the audience, and I knew it. They were hungry for the truth, just as I had been when I first learned of my betrayal. I glanced at Lily, whose eyes were wide, darting from me to the crowd, panic etched across her features. The designs you've admired tonight come with a backstory, a truth that many don't know, I continued, my gaze locking onto hers. This was never just a fairy tale of friendship. It was a battlefield of deceit. With a flip of the switch, I projected a slideshow behind me, a digital timeline of our friendship juxtaposed against the designs she had claimed as her own. Emails, sketches, and candid photographs scrolled across the screen, evidence that illuminated the dark corners of our past. Murmurs grew louder, confusion morphed the air and the gallery crackled with tension, every gasp and murmur mingling together into a dissonant symphony. As the images flickered across the screen, I felt a rush of satisfaction wash over me, like the tide turning after a long storm. I glanced at Lily, whose face had transformed from shock to fury, her carefully curated facade cracking and crumbling as the truth unfolded before her like an open wound. In that moment, I had never felt more alive. I had reclaimed my narrative, exposing her lies like a bright light piercing through the darkness. The audience, once captivated by her charm, now turned their bewildered gazes towards her. I reveled in the look of disbelief written across their faces, a look that mirrored the devastation I had felt for months. I could see whispers rising, questions weaving through the crowd like a chain reaction, and I knew the tide had shifted irreversibly. As the presentation concluded, I stepped down from the stage, my heart racing with exhilaration while my mind buzzed with disbelief at what I had just accomplished. Friends swarmed around me, offering their congratulations and support, their voices a harmonic echo of what I had lost and what I was starting to reclaim. Lisa squeezed my arm, her eyes gleaming with pride as she whispered, "You did it, Emma. You showed her." But amidst the applause and the newfound warmth of my friends, I felt a chill creep up my spine. As I turned to look for Lily, I caught sight of her retreating figure, swallowed by the crowd, her expression a tempest of rage and humiliation. For a moment, the satisfaction of my victory dimmed. I had laid bare the truth, but what awaited her outside the gallery? What would become of her when the echoes of my revelations faded? The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. My art had gained unexpected recognition, each piece I showcased becoming a testament to resilience and power. My blog garnered traction, resonating with those who had felt the sting of betrayal and the weight of stolen dreams. People reached out, eager to share their stories, inspired by my strength to confront my past. I had found my voice again, and it felt intoxicating, like a new dawn breaking over a once dark landscape. Yet, as I stood in my studio, surrounded by the colors I had poured my soul into, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered. I had avenged myself, I had exposed the truth, but with it came an unexpected weight. I realized that revenge, while cathartic, did not heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon me. The thrill of the moment had masked the deeper scars that remained, scars that would take time, patience, and self-love to heal. One evening, I was deep in thought, my paintbrush hovering over a canvas, when my phone buzzed with a message. It was a screenshot of a post Lily had made, a public statement, brimming with indignation and victimhood. "This is not the end," she declared, framing herself as the wronged artist, one whose work had been misrepresented by someone she once called a friend. Her words dripped with manipulation, and in that moment, I felt a stab of frustration mixed with pity. She still doesn't get it, I thought, recognizing the cycle of blame she was attempting to perpetuate. I had thought that exposing her would bring clarity, but instead, it only revealed the depths of her delusion. Days turned to weeks, and whispers in our small town began to shift. The narrative of betrayal became a cautionary tale of,
"Hey there, my name is Kimberly, and I never imagined I'd be sharing this story with the world, but here I am, sitting on my cluttered bed in my tiny apartment in Seattle, still surrounded by the remnants of my tumultuous past, the remnants of people I once called friends." It feels strange to relive it all, but I'll never forget the way betrayal swallowed me whole. You see, I was born and raised in this city, a place where torrential rains could wash away your sorrows, or so I thought. I spent the last 5 years working my dream job as a marketing coordinator at a bustling tech startup. I was excited, passionate, and ready to climb the corporate ladder. I thought I'd found my place among a close-knit team that felt like family. But sometimes, even families can be toxic. There were 4 key players in this drama: Jenna, my seemingly bubbly and supportive coworker; Mark, the charming and ambitious team lead; and Lisa, our director, who portrayed an air of warmth but was a crafty strategist beneath the surface. And then there was me, the idealistic dreamer, constantly chasing after validation and the desire to make an impact. I remember the first time I met Jenna. Her laughter filled the room like a warm glow. We bonded over late-night brainstorming sessions and coffee runs, and for a fleeting moment, I felt invincible. Mark was the golden boy, handsome with a dazzling smile that could charm anyone, including the higher-ups. He took me under his wing, giving advice and encouragement that propelled me forward. And Lisa? She was an enigmatic figure who played the game of office politics like a grandmaster, her eyes sparkling with cunning. But as the months rolled by, the illusion began to dissolve. The very people I had trusted turned into the architects of my downfall. Jenna started whispering in Lisa's ear, turning my ideas into hers, and I, oblivious, celebrated my friend's success. Mark's charm faded to reveal the ruthless ambition lurking beneath. I soon realized he had his eyes set on a promotion that I believed I deserved. I was backstabbed while under the guise of friendship and support. It was a bitter pill to swallow. I felt like the main character in a tragedy, betrayed by those I had once shared laughter and dreams with. But inside that pit of despair, a fire ignited. I knew then that revenge would take on a form I never anticipated. In the silence of my pain, I found clarity. Often, you get your revenge just by doing nothing and letting them fail. And that's where my story truly begins. It all came to a head one rainy Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day that felt like the universe shared my despair. I was sitting in the break room, sipping lukewarm coffee while scrolling through my phone, when I stumbled upon the company-wide email announcing the new marketing initiative. The highlight. A project that was the result of my late-night brainstorming sessions, my ideas, my heart, presented by none other than Jenna, now the shining star of our team. I felt the world tilt on its axis. My stomach twisted, and I could barely breathe. All that hard work, all those hours spent refining strategies and crafting pitches, and there she was, reaping the accolades while I stood invisible in the shadows. I wanted to scream, to accuse her of theft, but the weight of disbelief lay heavy on my shoulders, paralyzing me. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't anticipated. How could you? I wanted to shout at Jenna, who now grinned across the room, basking in the praise of our colleagues. Instead, I forced a smile, feeling a sickening mix of anger and humiliation clawing at my insides. I should have known better than to trust someone who wore her sweetness like a shield. In that moment, I felt more than just anger. I felt a profound sense of loss. These weren't just coworkers, they were supposed to be my friends. I kept recalling our coffee breaks, the way we huddled together during stressful deadlines, and the late-night talks about our dreams and life outside the office. To see that camaraderie stripped away, replaced by deception, left me feeling hollow. The betrayal didn't just come from Jenna. Mark had been there too, smiling and nodding as Jenna's pitch unfurled, as if he hadn't been the one to encourage me to share my vision in the first place. I could almost hear the echoes of our previous conversations, his words now twisted and tainted. "You're going to be a star, Kimberly," he'd said. But now, I realized those were just empty promises, his way of keeping me complacent while he plotted his ascent. Then there was Lisa, the puppet master pulling the strings. As she beamed at Jenna, I could see the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. She had orchestrated this whole charade, pitting us against one another, knowing full well that I would be the one left out in the cold. I felt like a fool, caught in a web spun from trust and betrayal, my heart pounding in my ears as the reality sunk in. They were all in on it. It ignited a rage that I struggled to contain. I felt it bubbling inside me like molten lava, threatening to erupt. But amidst that chaos, I found clarity. This was no longer about them winning, it was about me reclaiming my narrative. In the silence of my pain, I started to plot my response, not with fiery vengeance but with cold, calculated restraint. I would rise from the ashes of their betrayal, not through confrontation but by letting time and karma sort them out. I made a decision that day. I would step back, watch them stumble, and let the universe take its course. Often, doing nothing can be the most powerful form of revenge. I had no idea how long it would take for the truth to surface, but I was determined to bide my time. I would wait for the day when they were caught in their own web of deceit, when their facades crumbled under the weight of their lies, because in the long game, the truth always has a way of revealing itself. And so, I entered this new chapter of my life, armed, not with weapons of anger but with the quiet strength of patience. I would let the failings of the very ones who betrayed me become their undoing. Days turned into weeks, and as I settled into my newfound resolve to remain silent, the tension in the office escalated. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I could feel the undercurrents of betrayal swirling around me like a tempest. Jenna flourished in her new role, basking in the glow of her success, while Mark relentlessly pursued his promotion, leaving no room for camaraderie. Each passing day felt like a slow burn, a fierce reminder of everything I had lost. The facade they wore began to crack, though. It started with small things, Jenna mismanaging deadlines, missing key meetings she had once handled effortlessly. I watched from the sidelines, a grim sense of satisfaction creeping in. She was losing her grip, and the pressure was beginning to show. I noticed her snapping at colleagues, her laughter replaced by a shortness that didn't go unnoticed. It was clear to me that the weight of the deceit was suffocating her. But that was just the beginning. Mark, too, began to unravel as the stakes got higher. The promotion he coveted was no longer a sure thing, and his ego was bruised. I could see him trying to leverage Jenna's success to secure his position, but it only highlighted his desperation. He started to make mistakes, missed opportunities, botched client presentations. The once confident leader was slipping into a whirlwind of self-doubt and anxiety, and it was almost poetic to watch. Then came the project that was supposed to solidify Jenna's position. I overheard snippets of conversations during lunch breaks, whispers of dissatisfaction from clients who didn't share her vision. I felt a pang of sympathy for the woman I had once considered a friend, but I quickly crushed that thought. As she stumbled, the realization hit me, I should allow this to happen. I had spent too long nurturing my resentment and anger. It was time to step back and let her face her consequences. Lisa, the crafty strategist, was the last piece of the puzzle. She had orchestrated everything so expertly that it was as if she were playing a grand game of chess. But I could see the cracks in her confidence as well. A few of our higher-ups had started to question her decisions, how she had favored Jenna over others, and why she had allowed Mark's team to flounder. The whispers of discontent grew louder, and soon she was the subject of scrutiny during management meetings. I could see worry etched on her face, a stark contrast to the self-assured demeanor she had worn for so long. It was intoxicating, the way the universe began to shift. I took pleasure in the small victories of their failures, the quiet satisfaction of watching karma do its work. But there was still a gnawing discomfort in my chest. Was I becoming the very thing I despised? I had been wronged, but now I was reveling in their misfortunes. One evening, while Reviewing the latest marketing strategy documents, I received a message from an old colleague, Sarah, who had moved on to another company. She wanted to catch up over coffee, and I hesitated for a moment. But the lure of connection, of someone who could understand the weight of my struggle, was too hard to resist. When we met, she listened intently as I shared my story: Jenna's betrayal, Mark's downfall, Lisa's cowardice. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief as I recounted the events, but there was something else in her expression, a hint of caution. "Kimberly, are you sure you want to keep this up? Watching them fail can be sweet, but it can also consume you. It's like holding on to a grudge, it will only weigh you down." Her words echoed in my mind as I sat in my apartment later that night, the rain pattering against the window like nature's gentle reminder of my own turmoil. I felt a flicker of doubt, a realization that I had started to enjoy this game of sabotage and downfall a little too much. I was losing sight of my original desire for justice, and Sarah's words felt like a lifeline in murky waters. That's when I decided to refocus. I wouldn't let their failures consume me. Instead, I would channel my energy into my own growth. I set out to polish my resume, sign up for online courses, and network with professionals outside my toxic bubble. There was life beyond this episode of betrayal, and I was determined not to let their misgivings define my future. But just as I began to feel hopeful about my next chapter, the climax of my story hit like a thunderclap. It began with a company-wide meeting called by Lisa, who wore her anxiety like a poorly fitted mask. She intended to address the growing concerns regarding the marketing team's trajectory, and you could feel the tension in the room. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of their collective failures. As she rattled off the metrics and pointed fingers at Jenna and Mark, I realized that I had unknowingly become a spectator to their unraveling, a quiet witness to the chaos I had once been a part of. I felt a rush of mixed emotions: relief, sadness, and an odd sense of vindication. They were imploding under the pressures they had invited upon themselves, and I was watching it all unfold, the irony not lost on me. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Lisa announced a surprise restructure aimed at revitalizing the team. My colleagues were in the crosshairs, and as I sat back, a sense of calm washed over me. I had chosen to do nothing, and in doing so, I had let them fail spectacularly on their own terms. But the emotional weight of the moment was profound, and as I sat through their rising panic, I realized I could no longer find joy in their misfortunes. I had become entangled in their drama, and in that blind pursuit of revenge through silence, I had lost a part of myself. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the chaos within me. Was I truly the victor in this twisted tale, or had I merely become a pawn in a game I no longer wanted to play? With every passing second, I felt more lost, wondering whether the darkness of revenge would ultimately consume me. I needed to find my way back to the light, a path untainted by their treachery. I had wanted to watch them fail, but as the tension in the room reached its peak, I understood that the real battle would not be with them. It would be with myself, the struggle to reclaim my sense of purpose and step into a future unmarred by the shadows of betrayal. And so, I waited, not as a participant in their demise but as a spectator, ready to rise from the ashes of my own turmoil and reclaim my life, and perhaps, in time, even my forgiveness. Often, the real revenge is not about witnessing others' failures, it's about standing tall amidst the wreckage and writing your own story anew. There, in the flickering fluorescent lights of the conference room, reality crashed down like a wave of cold water. The meeting was unraveling, and I could see panic seeping into the faces of my former friends. Lisa was scrambling to control the narrative, while Jenna sat fidgeting, her confident facade crumbling with each question posed by our superiors. Mark, once the golden boy, now looked pale and small, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. It was then, amid the chaos, that I had my moment. As I sat at the edge of the room, a silent observer, I felt this surge of power wash over me, a quiet realization that I had longed for. They were the architects of their own demise. I had spent so much time crafting the fantasy of revenge in my mind that I had been blind to the truth. I didn't need to do anything. They were unraveling before my very eyes, and I had the privilege of witnessing it all unfold without lifting a finger. My heart raced as the reality settled in. I didn't have to be the villain in this narrative, they were doing a fine job of it themselves. I didn't need to shout accusations or confront anyone, all I had to do was remain steadfast and watch as their web of lies twisted tighter around them. The rush of emotions coursing through me felt exhilarating and terrifying at once. Suddenly, a wave of clarity hit me. I was no longer living for the approval of others, nor was I the girl hiding in the shadows, hoping for recognition in a world that had turned against me. Instead, I could become the author of my own story, a narrative that wouldn't revolve around revenge but about reclaiming my strength and dignity. I peered around the room, taking in the frantic exchanges, the rising stakes, and the palpable discomfort. A shiver of satisfaction coursed through me, like a spark igniting a flame. Jenna was squirming under the spotlight, her earlier confidence reduced to a mere shadow of herself. Mark's charm was gone, replaced by desperation. I could almost taste the bitterness of his ambition slipping through his fingers. And there was Lisa, the grand puppeteer, now fraying at the edges, her carefully curated image cracking under the weight of scrutiny. Each question they threw at her was like a hammer pounding at the foundation of her carefully built empire, and I found myself feeling a sense of liberation in that realization. I was done being the victim. Instead, I would allow the universe to enact its own brand of justice. In that moment, the decision crystallized within me. I would not waste my energy in futile confrontations or petty sabotage. I made a promise to myself. I would harness this newfound strength and channel it into something meaningful. It was time to reclaim my narrative, not through revenge but through growth and resilience. As Lisa's voice trembled, struggling to regain control of the meeting, I felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over me. I would step back and let the story play out. I would focus on my own journey, nurture my dreams, and rise above the ashes of betrayal. The tension in the room continued to escalate, turning into a whirlwind of chaos. Jenna's voice cracked under pressure, Mark's bravado faltered, and Lisa's attempts to shield them were met with skepticism. I watched with a detached calmness, feeling lighter with each passing moment. All those months of pain, of betrayal, of hurt, they didn't have to define me. The fire ignited within me wasn't a desire for revenge, it was a blazing determination to forge my own path. I realized that the silence I had embraced was more powerful than any confrontation. It was a space for my own healing to take root. As the meeting drew to a close, I knew I held the cards of my future in my hands. I wouldn't be shaped by their failures, nor would I let the bitterness linger. Instead, I would walk away from that room, lifting my head high, ready to embrace the opportunities that awaited me outside the confines of that toxic environment. And so I did. I stepped into the rain-soaked Seattle streets, feeling invigorated, liberated, and finally free. Often, doing nothing is the most profound form of revenge because it lets them fail spectacularly on their own terms. I was ready to let the world know that Kimberly was not just a victim of betrayal but a phoenix rising from the ashes, ready to write her own story, one that would echo resilience, strength, and the quiet power of personal triumph. This was my turning point, and from here on out, I would embrace every moment, not as a prisoner of my past, but as the architect of my own future. The narrative belonged to me now, and I would make damn sure it was a tale worth telling. Now that I had tasted the sweet clarity of my newfound purpose, it was time to solidify my steps forward. I wanted to ensure that while I distanced myself from the chaos, I also took advantage of the situation at hand. I had witnessed the cracks in the facade of Jenna, Mark, and Lisa. Now, it was time to let the universe take its course while I subtly nudged the fates in a direction that would further expose their failures. 1. Document everything. I started by meticulously documenting every interaction, every meeting, and every idea that had been stolen or misrepresented. I aimed to create a comprehensive timeline of events that would paint a clear picture of the deceit. I would save emails, record meetings, and jot down conversations in a password-protected digital notebook. If the time came when the truth had to be confronted, I wanted to have irrefutable evidence. 2. Build my network. The first step toward my reclamation was to expand my professional circle. I began reaching out to old contacts and former colleagues, rekindling those relationships that had faded during my time in the toxic environment. I attended networking events, tech meetups, and industry conferences. With each connection, I gathered insights, advice, and potential job leads. I wanted to build a safety net that transcended the limitations set by my former workplace. 3. Leveraging my skills. It was time to focus on myself. I enrolled in online courses that would enhance my marketing skills, things like digital analytics, social media strategy, and user experience design. I spent my evenings learning and growing, feeling the empowerment seep back in with each module completed. I was sharpening my toolkit, preparing for a future that didn't include any of the 3 backstabbers who had broken my trust. 4. Sideline alliances. I strategically started building alliances with others in the office who felt disillusioned by the rampant dishonesty proliferating within our teams. I wanted to create a quiet coalition, a group of like-minded individuals who recognized the flaws in our leadership. We would share insights and support one another, ensuring that when the time came to voice our concerns, we would do so with a unified front. 5. Subtle seeds of doubt. While I remained outwardly supportive and friendly to Jenna, Mark, and Lisa, I carefully planted subtle seeds of doubt amongst their peers. I'd casually drop comments about how Jenna's idea was great, but I wonder if she's managing the workload effectively, or how Mark's last presentation seemed a bit rushed, wonder if he's got too much on his plate? My goal was to create an atmosphere where their performance would come under scrutiny without them realizing my role in it. 6. Keep my distance, but stay visible. I made a calculated effort to stay visible within the office, attending team meetings and engaging in discussions, but I gradually withdrew from the social circles I once embraced. I would smile and nod, but I avoided the gossip sessions where treachery thrived. Instead, I directed conversations to topics of professional development or industry trends. This created an aura of professionalism while demonstrating my commitment to growth, setting me apart from the chaos surrounding me. 7. Prepare for the big reveal. As I continued this path of strategic withdrawal and empowerment, I began preparing for the moment when I would ultimately leave the company. I knew that when I secured a new position, one that would allow me to flourish, I wouldn't just be walking away, I would be leaving a legacy of quiet resilience. I made a point to have my next job lined up before I took the leap, ensuring that I wouldn't be at the mercy of my former colleagues' machinations. 8. Final showdown. When the time felt right, I was ready to make my move. I would present my findings to HR, showcasing my documentation of their unethical practices and demonstrating how their actions not only affected my career but the well-being of the entire team. I would step into that meeting armed with facts and a strong moral compass. I wasn't there to seek revenge, I was there to stand up for my truth and set the record straight. Ultimately, the plan was never about retaliation, it was about reclaiming my power, my narrative, and my life. I wanted them to witness their own downfalls, not through hostility but through my unwavering commitment to my own success. I found solace in the knowledge that the real revenge was not in seeing them fail but in rising above the betrayals to create a life filled with purpose and fulfillment. I would emerge from this situation stronger, wiser, and with a story that was truly mine. And so, as I lay out this plan before you, I am reminded of the most important lesson of all: sometimes, doing nothing is the most powerful form of revenge. It allows you to reclaim your agency, focus on your own journey, and let karma unfold in a way that only time can dictate. I was ready to embrace my future, leaving behind the toxic remnants of my past. After all, the best revenge is living well, and that's exactly what I intended to do. The day of reckoning arrived, and it felt electric. The air in the office crackled with tension, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface as whispers of discontent circulated among my colleagues. Jenna's pitch had just faltered spectacularly in a high-stakes meeting, and I knew the ramifications would ripple through the entire team. It was time for everything to implode. The conference room was a pressure cooker. Lisa stood at the helm, her face a mask of strained authority, trying to salvage what remained of her carefully crafted image. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh glow on the anxious faces of my former friends. Mark and Jenna were visibly sweating, their bravado crumbling like the walls of a house built on sand. "Let's focus on the metrics," Lisa insisted, her voice wavering slightly as she pulled up the latest sales figures on the projector. With each number that flashed across the screen, I could see Jenna sink deeper into her chair, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the table. The presentations Jenna had delivered with such confidence just weeks prior now reflected a downward spiral, and the silence that followed felt deafening. "Lisa, I think we need to address some of the client feedback," one of the senior executives chimed in, and at that moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. They were turning on her, and I had positioned myself to be the quiet observer, thriving in the shadows as I watched the fallout unfold. Jenna's earlier bravado faded as the questions became sharper, revealing the cracks in her confidence. We'll get it sorted out," she stammered, her voice lacking the conviction it once held. The room buzzed with skepticism, and my heart raced as I saw the shift. My plan had worked, like a beautiful symphony of poetic justice. Mark, who had once walked with an air of unshakable confidence, was now fidgeting, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "Maybe we need to consider a different strategy," he suggested weakly, attempting to redirect the focus, but his words fell flat like a deflated balloon. Just then, I felt a flash of heart-pounding exhilaration as I caught Lisa's eye. She was wearing a strained smile that couldn't mask her anxiety. I could tell she was grasping at straws to navigate a ship that was sinking fast. But I didn't want to be just a bystander, I wanted to subtly contribute to their unraveling, and I knew how. "Can we discuss the disconnect between our marketing strategies and client expectations?" I raised my hand, my voice steady and calm. The room shifted to face me, and I could almost feel the weight of attention on my shoulders. "Kimberly, do you have insights?" Lisa asked, her voice laced with desperation. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I think it's important to reflect on how we've implemented Jenna's recent initiatives. Some clients have expressed confusion regarding our messaging. There seems to be a misalignment in expectations. Perhaps it would be beneficial to address that directly." The collective gasps in the room were palpable. I felt the satisfaction wash over me as Jenna's face drained of color. I hadn't directly cast blame, but I had ignited the spark that would lead to their downfall. Lisa's eyes darted from Jenna to Mark, and I could see her mind racing, weighing her next move. She attempted to regain control. "We will take this feedback into account," she said, a note of false confidence in her voice. But it was clumsy, her bravado was merely a facade, and the tension in the room was suffocating. The executives exchanged glances, murmurs of concern echoing around them. In that moment, I could feel the tide truly turning. My heart was pounding as I watched Jenna shrink further into herself, a shadow of the vibrant woman I had once believed her to be. Mark began to sweat, his earlier air of confidence replaced with a desperate need to deflect blame. "Let's not forget that this was a team effort," he interjected hastily, trying to rally support. "We're all in this together, right?" But the intention behind his words felt hollow. The room had shifted from being a space of camaraderie to one of suspicion and blame. The executive who had initially raised concerns leaned forward. "It's crucial we ensure our strategies align with client expectations, and we can't afford to fail again. If there's an issue, we need a solution, not excuses." The final nail in the coffin struck when Jenna, in a moment of vulnerability, spoke up. "I'm sorry," I thought, but her voice cracked, and the vulnerability in her eyes was unmistakable. The room fell silent as she choked on her words, the truth of her failures weighing heavy in the air. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. This was my moment, the culmination of all my silent suffering and restraint. I could feel the rush of power within me. This was not just their downfall, this was my resurrection. I had fought my own battle, not with vengeance but with resilience, and now I was witnessing the poetic justice of it all. Jenna's tears betrayed her confidence, and as the weight of the moment pressed down on her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation. I was free from the emotional shackles they had bound me with. I could finally see the silver lining, my truth was emerging, and I was reclaiming my narrative. "Perhaps it would be best to reassess the leadership within the marketing team," I added, my voice steady. The words flowed like a river, cutting through the tension. Lisa's expression shifted again, dread creeping into her eyes as the realization of her authority slipped through her fingers. The room erupted into murmurs, and I felt a weight lift. The tide had turned, and I was not just a witness, I was an active participant in my own liberation. As the meeting drew to a close, I felt an unexpected pang of empathy for the broken people I once had called friends. They were crumbling under the weight of their own deceit: Jenna, the opportunist; Mark, the charlatan; Lisa, the manipulative mastermind. Watching their downfall was bittersweet, a reminder that betrayal often comes full circle. Walking out of that conference room, I felt lighter. The rain outside mirrored the cleansing of my spirit, washing away the remnants of hurt and anger. Often, doing nothing can be a powerful act of revenge, and on this day, I had emerged victorious, not by retaliating, but by rising from the ashes of betrayal. As I stepped into the rain-soaked streets of Seattle, a renewed sense of purpose washed over me. The universe had a way of righting wrongs, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace the journey ahead, unburdened and free. The story was mine to tell now, and I was determined to write it in the ink of resilience, strength, and hope. This was my moment of triumph, my final step away from the shadows into the light, and it felt like the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be defined by their betrayals but instead by my courage to rise above it all. The days that followed the chaotic meeting were a whirlwind of emotions. I watched as the company dynamics shifted rapidly. News of Jenna's faltered pitch and Mark's defensive posturing spread like wildfire, and the atmosphere inside the office thickened with unease. It felt surreal, like I was witnessing the collapse of a once powerful empire built on deceit and betrayal. Jenna, who had once filled the break room with laughter, was now reduced to a mere shadow. Colleagues who had once praised her success began to question her capabilities, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. She would sit alone during lunch, her eyes vacant, while colleagues whispered behind her back. The tables had turned, and the very people who had once celebrated her ideas were now scrutinizing her every move. My heart ached at the sight, but I quickly reminded myself that she had played a role in my own downfall. As for Mark, the golden boy's charm had dulled considerably. I could see him struggling to maintain his facade of confidence as he attempted to gloss over the feedback from higher-ups. Each time he walked by my desk, the bravado seemed to fade, replaced by a palpable sense of desperation. It was almost painful to watch, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction that bubbled beneath the surface. He had believed himself untouchable, but the reality was something much more sobering. Then, there was Lisa. She had been the mastermind behind the chaos, the one who had orchestrated the betrayals with deft precision. Watching her at work became a fascinating study. Her usual composed demeanor cracked under the pressure of internal scrutiny as she faced questions about her leadership style. The once smug confidence had morphed into a desperate need for validation, a facade as thin as glass. I marveled at how the tides had shifted so dramatically, and in those moments, I knew I had made the right choice in silently allowing events to unfold. But as I witnessed their downfalls, a strange sensation coursed through me. It was not the satisfaction I had anticipated. Instead, it was a wave of emptiness. I had spent so much time focusing on their failures that I had neglected to nurture my own growth. The irony was palpable. I had become so absorbed in their unraveling that I had momentarily forgotten about my own aspirations. Over the next few weeks, I dedicated myself to rebuilding my life, not just professionally but personally as well. I sought out opportunities that had once felt too lofty, reaching out to connections I had almost lost along the way. I attended networking events, and I signed up for workshops to expand my skill set. Each step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a piece that had been lost in the chaos of betrayal. I began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. The darkness I had once allowed to consume me slowly faded as I embraced the light that came with individual achievement. I was finding joy in my growth, not in the failures of others, but in the realization that my worth was built on my own merits. The final straw came when I was presented with a job offer from a competitor, a marketing firm that boasted an innovative approach and a collaborative culture. It felt surreal to receive that call, and as I accepted the offer, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I was breaking free from the chains that had held me captive in a toxic environment, and it felt exhilarating. Before leaving, I decided to confront the shadows of my past one last time. I reached out to Jenna, Mark, and Lisa, offering them a chance to discuss the events that had transpired. The conversations were awkward and tinged with discomfort, but I wanted to convey that while I had chosen to step away, it didn't mean I wished them harm. I expressed the hope that they could learn from this experience and perhaps grow as individuals. Jenna teared up during our conversation. She apologized for her actions, admitting she had let ambition cloud her judgment. Mark was defensive, but I could see the flicker of vulnerability beneath the bravado. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed defensive at first but eventually admitted to feeling overwhelmed by expectations. It was a bittersweet moment, a chance to offer forgiveness, but also a reminder of the scars that betrayal had left behind. As I walked out of that conference room for the last time, I felt a profound sense of closure. I had confronted the past and made space for my future. The betrayal I had endured had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, armed with the wisdom gained from hardship. Reflecting on what had transpired, I realized that often, the best revenge isn't about watching others fail, it's about rising above the chaos and reclaiming your narrative. I had turned pain into strength and betrayal into a catalyst for personal growth. As I sat in my new office on the first day of my dream job, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I was finally free. The echoes of the past faded as I looked ahead, ready to embrace the opportunities that awaited me. Life is a journey that can be shaped by our experiences, but it's how we choose to respond that truly defines our path. In the end, it wasn't about watching them fall, it was about learning to soar on my own wings. I had transformed into the master of my own fate, and in that moment, I understood that often, doing nothing truly allows the universe to reveal the truths we need to confront. And with that knowledge, I stepped forward, determined to write a story filled with resilience, grace, and a kind of triumph that could only come from overcoming the darkness.
In the faded warmth of my childhood home, I can still smell the lingering aroma of my mother's chicken pot pie wafting through the air, a scent that once brought comfort but now feels tainted with betrayal. The walls, once painted a cheerful yellow, have dulled over the years, much like the hope I held for justice. It's strange how a house can hold memories so tightly, yet feel so empty when it matters most. I stand in the living room, glancing at the old family photos lined up on the mantelpiece. Each frame captures moments of laughter and light, but the absence of my sister, Mia, hangs in the air like a thick fog. She was my best friend, my confidant, a vibrant spirit whose laughter could fill this space with joy even on the darkest days. But now, the silence is a constant reminder of how cruel the world can be, especially to those who deserve it the least. 4 months ago, everything fell apart. I remember that day vividly, the sun setting in shades of red and orange outside while I was on my way to meet Mia. She was supposed to be waiting for me at her favorite cafe, the one with the mismatched furniture and the best cinnamon rolls in town. But instead, she was inside the emergency room, her face a mask of pain, her spirit dimmed by the betrayal of someone she once called a friend. Enter Jake. Charismatic, intelligent, and charming, he swept into Mia's life like a summer breeze, igniting a spark of happiness that had been absent for too long. But beneath his handsome exterior lurked a darkness that would soon unravel everything. I couldn't see it then, and neither could she. It's funny how the heart can blind you to danger when you crave love and acceptance, isn't it? That day, as I rushed through the sterile hallways of the hospital, my heart pounding with dread, I could never have imagined the extent of Jake's betrayal. Mia lay in that bed, her bright eyes clouded with confusion and pain. The doctors had done their best to explain, but I couldn't process the words. My mind was screaming, how could someone do this? As I stood beside her, holding her hand while she whispered about dreams that now felt so far away, a swell of anger unfurled within me. It was foreign yet familiar, a feeling I hadn't felt since the time I stood up to a bully in middle school. Only this time, the stakes were far higher, and the enemy much closer. I could only think of one thing: Jake had to pay for what he had done. Days turned into weeks, and the pain morphed into a relentless fire that fueled my every waking moment. I knew I had to find a way to make it right, no matter what it took. I wasn't going to seek vengeance in the childish way that we often fantasize about. This was about justice. Legal justice. The kind that cuts deep and leaves scars that last a lifetime. So, here I am, standing at the precipice of a plan that can only bring me closer to the truth. There's a fine line between revenge and justice, and I'm prepared to walk it, no matter the cost. The taste of retribution is bittersweet, but I can already feel the thrill of the chase, Mia's voice, a soft whisper in the back of my mind, urging me to be strong. It's time to unleash the storm that's been brewing within me, and I can't shake the feeling that it's just the beginning. What I'm about to embark on is a journey of emotional turmoil and a quest for retribution that will test not only my resolve but my very soul. The initial shock of Mia's injury dulled over time, but the ache of betrayal grew sharper. Jake had manipulated her, twisted her trust until it snapped under the weight of his lies. He had convinced her, oh so softly, that the world was only ever going to be a beautiful place filled with endless possibilities. But his idea of a beautiful world turned out to be a nightmare, one that involved deceit and betrayal so heinous it ripped through Mia's life like a jagged knife. It was a Monday when Mia finally found the courage to tell me the truth. We were sitting on her bed, the sunlight filtering through the half-closed curtains, casting soft shadows that danced across her face. She had been quiet for a while, her gaze fixed on a spot on the floor as if it held the answers to all her questions. My heart raced as I sensed the weight of her words hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. I thought he loved me, she said, her voice trembled, breaking into a million pieces. But he was using me, all along. I could see the flicker of disbelief in her eyes, as though she were still trying to reconcile the love she had felt with the pain of betrayal. Using you? How? What do you mean? I asked, every word laced with desperation. The room felt like it was closing in around us, the walls echoing our growing horror. He wanted my dad's connections, she confessed, her hands trembling. He needed money for his startup, and I was just an easy target. He thought I wouldn't find out. The tears streamed down her cheeks, each drop a testament to her shattered trust. In that moment, my heart hardened. A primal surge of anger replaced the sorrow. How could someone who once seemed so genuine turn out to be a monster? I felt rage bubbling up inside me, a visceral reaction to this betrayal that had stolen Mia's spirit and threatened to extinguish her light forever. But it wasn't just the betrayal that ignited the fire within me, it was the calculated coldness with which Jake had operated. He had set a trap, one that had ensnared not only Mia but her entire world. She was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered dreams, while he strutted around town as if he were the king of it all. The more I learned, the deeper my anger sank. I discovered that Jake had already begun to weave his deceitful web with others, his charm disarming them just as it had Mia. I felt sick to my stomach knowing that he had moved on, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty promises in his wake. How many others had he hurt? How many lives had he destroyed with his lies? I spent hours poring over legal documents, researching the murky waters of defamation and personal injury. I was determined to turn his betrayal into a courtroom drama, an expose of his true nature. I would reveal the man behind the mask, the manipulator hiding in plain sight. I imagined the moment when he would be called to account for his actions, stripped of his charm, and ordered to face the consequences of his deceit. But with each step forward, the emotional armor I tried to don felt increasingly fragile. What if I couldn't prove his guilt? What if Mia's pain was all for nothing? The specter of doubt loomed large, contrasting with the righteous indignation that coursed through my veins. And then, in the quiet moments of the night, I found myself pacing the dimly lit living room of our childhood home, the familiar shadows growing heavier with each step. I replayed the harrowing details of Mia's situation over and over in my mind, feeling like a helpless bystander in her tragedy. Each time I thought I had a grip on my emotions, another wave of anger threatened to drown me. Then came the day it escalated beyond what I could have imagined. As I sat at my laptop, drafting emails to potential witnesses who could testify about Jake's manipulative nature, my phone buzzed with a notification. I opened Instagram only to be met with a picture of Jake, beaming as he posed with friends at a local bar. The caption read, "Living my best life. #blessed. My heart sank, and it felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. The sheer audacity of it all sent my blood boiling. I wanted to scream. How could he carry on as if nothing had happened? How could he flaunt his happiness while Mia suffered in silence? My fingers flew across the keyboard, composing a direct message, but I paused before hitting send. Would it even matter? Would he feel a shred of guilt, or would he just laugh at my rage? The doubt gnawed at me like a persistent rat, and in that moment, I felt utterly isolated. The following week, I attended a support group for victims of emotional abuse, hoping to find solace in shared experiences. As I listened to the stories of others, I felt a strange mixture of empathy and fury. Each story mirrored Mia's to some extent, and I found myself becoming a silent warrior fueled by the pain of others. Yet, when it was my turn to share, I felt the weight of my own experience constricting my throat. I could hardly speak, my voice trembling as I recounted Mia's betrayal and the darkness it had cast over our lives. But as I shared, I caught sight of Jake standing just outside the window, casually leaning against a car, an amused smile plastered across his face. I stumbled over my words, my heart racing as humiliation washed over me. How could he just show up there, watching me like some twisted voyeur? My trust in the support group shattered in that instant. Did they know he was there? Were they judging me? That night, I lay in bed replaying the scene in my mind, feeling more vulnerable than ever. It felt like Jake had not only betrayed Mia but had turned me into a puppet, pulling my strings while I danced to his sadistic tune. The sense of isolation was suffocating, and I began to withdraw from friends who sensed my mounting anger. "You're becoming obsessed," they'd say with concerned frowns. "It's not healthy. You need to let it go." But how could I? Then came the moment that shifted everything into overdrive, the email that would set my plan in motion. I had finally connected with a lawyer who specialized in defamation cases, someone who had a reputation for taking down powerful people. I felt a tingle of hope as I drafted my initial message. I was ready to pursue this, to take it all the way. I pressed send, feeling a rush of adrenaline course through me. But within days of that email, the consequences of my actions bore down harder than I could have imagined. Jake retaliated swiftly. I received a cease and desist letter in the mail, claiming that I was spreading libelous statements about him. It was like a punch to the gut. I had done nothing wrong, and yet I felt the walls closing in around me. His power, his reach was suffocating. For a moment, I felt like I had stepped into a David versus Goliath story, and I was the underdog facing a giant with an arsenal of legal weaponry. As I read the letter, my blood ran cold. It was meticulously worded, each line designed to instill fear, laden with accusations that twisted my intentions into something sinister. The heaviness of it weighed on my chest, and for the first time, I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. Had I just unwittingly unleashed a monster that would claw its way back to me? But then I thought of Mia, of her tear-streaked face in that hospital bed, the worry in her eyes as she shared the details of her heartache. I thought of how much she had lost, how her laughter had been silenced by this man. I thought of the way Jake had tried to snuff out her spirit and how he felt untouchable, operating in the shadows, while her dreams rotted under the weight of his betrayal. The final straw came when I saw Mia again a few days later, this time in her own home. She was trying to put on a brave face, but I could see through her facade. She had started therapy, but it was clear it would take time to heal. As she spoke about her progress, her voice trembled. "I just want to be myself again," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. And it hit me like a freight train. I realized in that moment that it wasn't just about revenge, it was about giving Mia her life back. I could feel the weight of my anger morphing into something more profound, a sense of purpose. I glanced around her room, the cheerful decorations a stark contrast to the sadness that enveloped her. I was no longer merely a bystander, I was stepping into the role of an avenger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself awake, pacing the floor as the darkness closed in around me. Each step was a drumbeat, matching the rhythm of my racing heart. The letters, threats, and consequences swirled in my mind, but they no longer terrified me. They ignited a fire within me, blazing bright and fierce. I sat at my desk, grabbing a pen and paper, scribbling down plans for evidence collection, strategic conversations to have, and potential allies I could reach out to. My mind raced with possibilities, and the fear that had taken root began to dissolve, replaced with the intoxicating thrill of taking back control. I mapped out a timeline, drawing connections between Jake's prior partnerships, discovering a host of people he had duped before Mia, others who might be willing to join me in this fight. I became a detective in my own right, gathering information as if I were piecing together a puzzle that had been scattered across the floor. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring into my own eyes, and feeling an odd mix of fear and exhilaration. I was no longer just a brother looking for justice, I was becoming a force to be reckoned with. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. "You will do this." The moment solidified my resolve. I wasn't just doing this for Mia, I was doing it for every person Jake had ever hurt. I was going to ensure that he would no longer be able to slide through life unscathed, protected by his charm and wealth. The time had come to expose him, to strip away the facade he wore like armor. As I walked back into the living room, filled with the echoes of memories, I felt a sense of purpose settle in my gut. The plan began to take shape, intricately woven like a tapestry of revenge, justice, and hope. It would be executed with precision and patience, each step designed to slowly but surely unravel Jake's web of lies. Revenge plan. Step by step, I would start by collecting every piece of evidence I could find that showcased Jake's manipulative behavior. I created a timeline, marking key events when Mia had mentioned his questionable actions. I began to reach out to mutual friends and acquaintances, people who might have witnessed Jake's behavior or heard whispers of his deceit. Jake was charismatic and well liked. Some people might hesitate to believe the worst about him, while others might be too intimidated to speak out against him. Through my research, I discovered a few individuals who had been wronged by him, friends of friends who had shared their stories in hushed conversations. I reached out, cautiously at first, framing it as a simple gathering to share experiences. Over coffee and pastries, we pieced together how Jake had manipulated and betrayed each one of us. Trust among us was fragile. Some were still reeling from their experiences and reluctant to engage in any sort of confrontation with Jake. It would take time to build rapport and establish a sense of unity. I needed to bring in someone with experience, someone who could help navigate the legal waters. I sent my research to a law firm specializing in personal injury and defamation cases, highlighting the connections between Jake's actions and Mia's emotional distress. I met with a lawyer who understood the psychological aspects of our case and assured me that we could build a compelling narrative. Securing a lawyer willing to take on the case without initial proof could be challenging. I would have to convince them of the merit of our claims and the potential for a successful lawsuit. I began to keep meticulous records, email exchanges, text messages, and social media posts that could prove Jake's manipulations. I even created a shared Google Drive with the coalition's evidence, where each member could upload their findings securely. Every little piece of information gathered would contribute to building a stronger case against him. Jake could easily delete his messages or deny them. The ephemeral nature of digital communication posed a significant challenge, but I would ensure that everything was backed up and saved. As I gathered more dirt on Jake, I started crafting a narrative that would expose him without directly implicating myself initially. I began posting subtle hints on social media, anonymously at first, about someone who pretends to be perfect but is far from it. This would pique curiosity and potentially get people talking about Jake without naming him. The risk of Jake discovering my plans was high. If he caught wind of my intentions too early, he could retaliate, pulling strings to manipulate the narrative in his favor. Once I felt confident with evidence and coalition support, I orchestrated an encounter where I would confront Jake, with witnesses present. I rented a small room at a cafe under the guise of organizing a reunion for friends. As people arrived, I made sure to invite those who had shared their stories. Once Jake walked in, I planned to present the evidence in front of the assembled group, the air thick with tension and anticipation. The day had arrived. I could barely contain the adrenaline pulsing through my veins as I stood in the back of the cafe, watching the door. Friends had gathered, some curious, others eager to support. They didn't know the details yet, but they would soon witness the unfolding of a dramatic confrontation that would pierce the very heart of deceit. When Jake finally strolled in, radiating his usual charm, he seemed oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. His smile was infectious, a mask that betrayed nothing of the darkness lurking within. I clenched my fists, the mere sight of him making my stomach churn. He greeted everyone casually, dropping jokes and smiles like confetti, completely unaware of the reckoning that awaited him. As the group settled, I caught Mia's anxious gaze across the room. She had agreed to be here, but I could see the trepidation in her eyes. I remembered her fragile spirit, the way it had once shone brightly, and how Jake had extinguished that light. I raised an eyebrow at her, silently reassuring her that this was for her, for all that she had lost. Once everyone had settled, I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of my heart thundering in my chest. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions raging inside me. "We're here not just to catch up, but to address someone who has been hiding behind a mask of charm." I nodded toward Jake, and the mood shifted instantaneously. Laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence brimming with tension. Jake's grin faltered slightly as he furrowed his brow, confusion flickering across his face. "What's this about? Come on, man. We're here to have fun." He scoffed, attempting to brush off the palpable tension. But I was done playing games. "Mia," I called, my gaze locking onto hers. "Can you share the story of how you met Jake?" Mia looked up, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. "I thought he loved me," she started, her voice trembling but gaining strength. "But it was all a lie. He was using me." Gasps echoed around the room, and Jake's face contorted into a mask of anger. "This is ridiculous. Mia, you're twisting things." He barked, but my heart quickened. The moment of revelation was dawning. I stepped forward, feeling the power surge within me. "You can't twist the truth, Jake. We have evidence." I activated a projector, and images flickered to life on the screen behind me, screenshots of manipulated texts, emails where Jake had woven his web of deceit, and testimonies from others who had fallen victim to his charm. The looks on the faces of our friends, but more importantly, on Jake's, were priceless. Shock, disbelief, horror. His skin turned an ashen shade, the bravado crumbling as the weight of betrayal bore down on him. "What the hell is this?" Jake stammered, his confidence evaporating like mist in the morning sun. "You can't do this." "But I can," I said, my voice rising above the chaos. "You thought you could get away with hurting Mia and everyone else, didn't you? You thought you were untouchable." Screams of outrage began to ripple through the group. "You manipulated her. How could you? We trusted you." With each accusation, Jake's composure cracked further, revealing the confrontation unraveled like a live wire, sparking chaos in the cafe as people shouted over one another, incredulous at Jake's twisted manipulation. His facade crumbled, revealing the coward he had always been beneath the polished veneer. I stood there, adrenaline coursing through me, my heart pounding like a drum as I watched the truth finally claw its way to the surface. As Jake attempted to defend himself, stammering excuses that fell flat against the weight of the evidence, I felt the room shift. The cacophony of voices reached a fever pitch, friends who had once admired him were now echoing their disgust. I could see Mia in the corner of my vision, her face both pale and fierce, the pain of her betrayal reflected in the storm of emotion swirling around us. This was it, this was the reckoning. The moment we had all awaited, where Jake would no longer be able to hide behind his charm or manipulate the narrative to his advantage. And yet, in the midst of this victory, a chilling realization set in. Once the storm quieted, Jake's face twisted in rage, revealing the raw, unfiltered emotion that had been buried beneath his charm for so long. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice low and menacing. "I have connections, and I'll destroy you." For a fleeting moment, anxiety washed over me. I looked around the room, seeing eyes filled with concern, but also a newfound resolve. They were with us now, united against a common enemy. But the consequences of my actions set in motion a chain reaction that would reverberate for months to come. Jake did, in fact, use his connections to retaliate. The following week, I woke up to find my inbox flooded with emails, cease and desist letters, threats of defamation lawsuits, and even an ultimatum. He painted me as an obsessed brother seeking revenge, attempting to turn the narrative on its head. At first, I was terrified. I hadn't expected him to go on the offensive. I spent sleepless nights worrying about the implications for Mia and our friends. Would this spiral out of control? Would he drag everyone down with him in his pursuit of vengeance? But I had gathered my coalition, and they were ready for a fight. We pooled our resources and hired the attorney I had met earlier, one who specialized in defamation and had a reputation for taking down powerful people. With every bit of evidence we collected, our case grew stronger, and we became a force that he couldn't easily dismiss. As the court date approached, I found a sense of calm amidst the chaos. I was no longer merely a brother seeking revenge for his sister. I had transformed into an advocate for all those who had been wronged by Jake, a voice for the silenced, a champion for the truth. With each passing day, I felt like I was shedding my own fears, emerging as a warrior ready to battle the darkness that had engulfed me as life. But the emotional toll was immense. Between court preparations, the whispers of gossip, and the pressure of scrutiny from friends and family, I began to feel the burden of it all. Mia was navigating her own healing, and I felt helpless as I watched her wrestle with the fear and anxiety that still haunted her. Even though we were fighting back, she struggled with her self-worth, often questioning why this had happened to her and how one person could hold so much power over her happiness. One night, after another exhausting day in court, I found us sitting in silence, Mia curled up in a blanket on the couch, and me.
You never really know how far someone can push you until you're standing on the edge, staring into the abyss with no intentions of turning back. I learned that lesson the hard way when I found myself not just wishing for revenge, but actively plotting it. But let me take you back to where it all started, an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sun hangs lazily in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of our suburb. I was sitting in my living room, surrounded by the familiar comforts of my home, faded throw pillows, the scent of lavender wafting from the candle flickering on the coffee table, and the gentle hum of the world outside filtering through the open window. But all I could feel was the tight knot of anger coiling in my stomach. I remember how that anger felt, like a storm brewing just on the horizon, ready to break. I had just walked out of my job at the local art gallery, my dreams trapped behind the glass walls that surrounded my desk. It was a dead-end position, to be honest, but I loved it. Every day, I immersed myself in the vibrant colors and textures of creativity, hoping one day to showcase my own work. And that's when Jake appeared, a slick, ambitious new director who swept in like a breath of fresh air. At first, I was captivated by his easy charm and infectious laughter, but soon it became clear that he was more interested in climbing the corporate ladder than nurturing the talent around him. He wasn't just an annoyance, he was a thief, an opportunist who took what wasn't his to take. I had poured my heart and soul into a project, a passion piece that had taken months of sleepless nights to create. I could still hear the echoes of my excitement as I unveiled it in the gallery that night, only to watch as he casually claimed it as his own in front of our colleagues, basking in the applause I'd worked so hard to earn. My heart sank as I realized that my dreams were nothing but stepping stones for his own ambitions. But the ultimate betrayal came when he decided to borrow my car for a quick errand, a beautiful, vintage Mini Cooper I had saved for years to restore. It was more than just a car, it was a symbol of independence, freedom, and all the hard work I had put into building my life. When he returned it, I was too naive to notice the slight change in his demeanor, the way he smirked when I took the keys from his hands. It wasn't until I caught a glimpse of it parked outside my building a few days later, with fresh scratches along the side and the unmistakable odor of smoke permeating the interior, that the gravity of what had unfolded hit me like a freight train. And that's when the storm inside me began to rage. The air turned electric, and I could feel the rage boiling over, a fire igniting my resolve. This wasn't just about the car anymore, it was about reclaiming what was mine, my pride, my creativity, my very sense of self. So, you want your car back? Fine. Go get it. Those words echoed in my mind like a mantra, a promise to myself. I didn't know how far I was willing to go, but I felt the thrill of chaos whispering sweetly at the back of my mind. The stage was set, and I was ready to unleash a storm that would leave nothing in its wake but the ash of betrayal and the sweet taste of revenge. The moment I stepped outside to confront the reality of my situation, I felt like I was moving in slow motion. My heart thundered in my chest as I approached my Mini Cooper, its once vibrant paint now marred by the ugly scratches that seemed to scream betrayal. I could feel the weight of disbelief pressing down on me, a dense fog that clouded my thoughts. How could Jake, A person I considered a friend, do something so cruel. A part of me wanted to rationalize it, to convince myself it was an accident, a silly mistake. But another part warned me, whispering truths I was too afraid to accept. This was intentional, a calculated move in his game. As I traced my fingers over the damaged paint, memories flooded back like an unwanted tide. I recalled the late nights spent hunched over the hood, restoring every detail of the car, infusing it with pieces of my soul. I had named her Luna, a beacon of my aspirations and hard work. To see her disrespected like this felt like an affront to my very identity. A surge of anger coursed through me, feeling like molten lava bubbling beneath the surface, ready to erupt. Where was the fairness in this? I had done nothing but support him, and in return, I was repaid with betrayal. It was as if someone had ripped away a layer of my skin, exposing a raw, painful vulnerability that I didn't know how to heal. I stood there, grappling with feelings of confusion, rage, and a heartache that felt too heavy to bear. In that moment, I heard laughter erupt from the other side of the street, and my eyes instinctively darted toward the sound. There was Jake, lounging against his shiny new sedan, surrounded by a group of colleagues who looked up to him with admiration. He was animated, gesturing wildly as he recounted some supposed adventure he had with my car. Those familiar faces looked at him with admiration, and my stomach twisted in knots. They had no idea what he was capable of. My blood boiled as I watched him play the role of the charming hero, a far cry from the opportunist I had come to know. Why do I even care? I thought bitterly. He's just another phony, making a fool out of everyone. But it wasn't just Jake's betrayal that cut deep, it was the betrayal of trust, of friendship, of every late-night conversation we had shared over takeout. I had opened my heart to him, and he had twisted it into a weapon to serve his own interests. I leaned against the car, my breath hitching as I fought against the swell of emotions. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lash out and shake him until the truth fell from his lips like broken glass. Instead, I felt a cold resolve settle within me. I would not be a victim in this twisted game. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting deep shadows across the pavement, I imagined the sweet revenge that lay ahead. The thought sent a thrill through me, igniting the fire I had buried beneath layers of confusion and hurt. I could almost hear the gears of my mind whirring as I strategized, envisioning how best to expose him for the fraud he truly was. "You want your car back? Fine. Go get it." The words became my battle cry, galvanizing my spirit. The more I thought about it, the more I could feel the pieces of my plan clicking into place. I couldn't just reclaim my car, I had to reclaim my narrative. He would regret that he ever crossed me. But the rush of determination I felt that day turned out to be a flickering candle in a raging storm. Little did I know, Jake was not just some petty thief, he was a cunning predator who thrived on chaos and manipulation. Each day that passed, my initial anger morphed into something darker, something that threatened to consume me whole. The storm I had felt brewing was now a tempest, and I was caught in the eye of it, spiraling into a whirlwind of despair. As I sought out allies, people I believed shared my disdain for Jake's antics, I found myself met with indifference or outright dismissal. My closest friend, Lisa, whom I'd shared countless confidences with, listened to my plight but responded with a patronizing tone that made my blood boil. "Maybe you're overreacting a bit. It's just a car, after all." The words pierced through me like a blade, a reminder that my world, my struggles were insignificant to those around me. The isolation crept in, slowly suffocating me, and I began to realize that the only person I could rely on was myself. The tension escalated further when I overheard a conversation in the break room between Jake and another colleague. They were discussing a new project he'd spearheaded, and as I listened, my heart plummeted. They were praising him for his vision, unaware it was built on the shattered remnants of my own creativity. My stomach twisted into knots, realization dawning that while I was stewing in my own anger, he was thriving, winning allies and accolades I yearned for. It felt as if the ground beneath me was slipping away, and with it, my sense of belonging. My mental state began to deteriorate. I found myself awake at night, pacing the floor, heart racing as I replayed my encounters with him in my mind. Each memory became a weight, dragging me deeper into despair. The more I plotted my revenge, the more isolated I felt. I stopped reaching out to friends, pushing them away so I wouldn't have to share the raw, furious thoughts swirling in my head. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of my own life, waiting for the moment my rage would erupt like a volcano. Then came the day when the humiliation hit its peak. I had decided to confront Jake directly. Fueled by a cocktail of anger and adrenaline, I found him in his office, the air thick with the smell of fresh coffee and self-importance. I demanded an explanation for what he had done to my car, my voice steady but my heart pounding like a war drum. But rather than the confrontation I anticipated, Jake's response was a condescending chuckle that echoed through the room. "Relax, it's just a car. Besides, you should be grateful I didn't write it off." The laughter that followed from his lackeys felt like knives piercing through my skin. It didn't stop there. He casually tossed a couple of crumpled bills onto my desk, compensation for the car that felt like a slap in the face. The moment felt suspended in time, and I could feel my cheeks burn as the laughter continued to ring in my ears, a chorus of mockery that only I could hear. In that moment, I wasn't just confronting Jake, I was facing the reality of my own impotence, and it left me raw and exposed. I stumbled out of the office, barely holding back tears, feeling like I had just been stripped of my dignity. The walls of the gallery felt like they were closing in on me as I navigated the halls, avoiding the concerned gazes of people. I stumbled into my studio, the small sanctuary I had carved out for myself amidst the chaos of emotions swirling in my heart. The door slammed behind me, a reflexive action fueled by anger and hurt, a barrier between me and the unforgiving world outside. The silence enveloped me like a thick fog, but it did little to soothe the tempest raging within. I collapsed onto the worn-out couch, feeling the tears I had been holding back finally spill over. That humiliating encounter with Jake replayed in my mind like a broken record, a haunting melody I couldn't escape. "It's just a car." Those words echoed in my skull, reverberating through every crevice of my shattered self-esteem. I felt small, insignificant, reduced to a character in someone else's story, a footnote in Jake's climb to success. I buried my face in my hands, but the tears only made the storm inside me worsen. Then, something snapped inside me, a realization so powerful and paralyzing, it consumed my thoughts entirely. I was tired of being the victim. Tired of feeling powerless while Jake reaped the rewards of my hard work, my dreams, and my creativity. The rage I had felt earlier began to morph, crystallizing into something sharper, darker, a resolve to take back what was rightfully mine. It was the final straw, and in that moment, I decided I wouldn't just reclaim my Mini Cooper, I would dismantle Jake's empire, brick by brick. As the reality of my decision sank in, I pushed myself off the couch and paced the studio, a renewed fire burning in my veins. I envisioned the meticulous plan forming in my mind, each thought fueling the other, like a wildfire devouring a dry forest. I would need to be clever, calculating, transforming my passion for art into a weapon of retribution. I grabbed my sketchpad, a tool I had used countless times for my art, but today it would serve a different purpose. I began to sketch my plan, scribbling down ideas that initially felt flimsy, but slowly took form. There was something liberating about shifting my focus from despair to action. The very act of planning felt like I was reclaiming my power, piece by piece. My thoughts drifted back to the way Jake had paraded my stolen creativity as his own. The confidence he exuded, the supply of sycophants hanging on to his every word, it all began to illuminate a new path. I would expose him, not just as a fraud but as a manipulator who took advantage of those around him. I would show everyone who he truly was. In that moment, a sense of purpose washed over me, eclipsing the shadow of despair. I would gather evidence of Jake's transgressions, the bits and pieces of my work he had so effortlessly claimed as his own. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Jake had friends in high places, and he was skilled at spinning narratives to his favor. But I had something he didn't, desperation and a fierce will to reclaim what was mine. The turning point came not just as a realization of my anger, but as a profound understanding of what was at stake, my identity, my artistry, and my very future. I was done running away, done hiding in the shadows of his success. I would become the architect of my own retaliation, and revenge would be my medium, my canvas. "You want your car back? Fine. Go get it." The words hung in the air, a promise I made to myself. I could picture the moment vividly, The look on Jake's face when he realized he had underestimated, with my mind racing and a fierce determination igniting my spirit, I sketched out my revenge plan in meticulous detail. Every moment I spent strategizing felt like taking back a piece of myself. This was no longer about just my car, it was about reclaiming my creativity, my dignity, and my narrative. I would turn the tables on Jake and make him pay for everything he had taken from me. Here's how I planned to execute my revenge, step by step. I knew I couldn't just accuse Jake of theft and manipulation without proof. I needed hard evidence that would expose his lies and deceit. Over the next few weeks, I made it a point to document everything I could about our project, the emails, drafts, and any correspondence we had shared. I had saved some of my original sketches and notes, so I started compiling them into a comprehensive timeline that illustrated every instance where Jake had taken credit for my work. I also reached out to other colleagues discreetly, engaging them in casual conversations about the projects Jake had championed. I wanted to see just how much they knew about the origin of those ideas, and whether his reputation was as untouchable as he believed. I even befriended the gallery intern, who often shadowed Jake. She was eager to share tidbits of gossip, and I subtly asked her about his methods. The more I gathered, the more confident I felt. I was building a case. Next, I needed to find a way to turn Jake's friends against him. This would require some clever maneuvering. I decided to approach a colleague named Sarah, who had been vocal about her frustrations with Jake's management style. Under the guise of casual conversation, I subtly expressed my concerns about his treatment of staff and his penchant for taking credit for others' ideas. Over lunch, I carefully planted seeds of doubt, nudging Sarah to consider how often Jake's success coincided with the misfortune of others. The idea was to build an alliance of discontent without revealing my true intentions. I knew that if I could rally a small group of colleagues to question his authority, it would destabilize his influence and give me the public support I needed when the time came to strike. As I crafted my plan, an unexpected opportunity arose. The gallery was hosting an annual art exhibition, and each of the staff was encouraged to showcase their work. This event would be the perfect backdrop for my revenge. I decided to create a series of pieces that depicted the journey of an artist overshadowed by a charismatic fraud, themes of theft, betrayal, and reclaiming one's voice. The pieces were not just canvases, they were bait. I poured all my energy into creating artwork that was raw and reflective of my experiences. I would not only showcase my talent but also create a narrative that alluded to Jake's deceit without naming him outright. The finale would include a piece that, when unveiled, would draw a direct connection to my journey. My Mini Cooper, a beautiful representation of my artistic spirit, would be featured in the center of the exhibit. On the night of the exhibition, I planned to unveil my art in a dramatic fashion. I would invite Jake personally, ensuring he was present to witness the transformation of my despair into something powerful. The invitation would be laced with sarcasm, hinting that this was a moment he would not want to miss. As the crowd gathered, I would narrate the story behind my artwork, subtly weaving in the parallels between the night of the exhibition arrived, electric with anticipation. The gallery buzzed with people, laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft strains of music. My heart raced, not just with anxiety but with an exhilarating rush of power. I was ready. As I stood next to my centerpiece, the painting of my beloved Mini Cooper, a stunning explosion of color and emotion, I took a moment to breathe it all in. The canvas pulsated with the raw energy of my journey, my anger, my heartbreak, and ultimately, my reclamation. I could feel the weight of the past slip from my shoulders as I transformed pain into beauty. The crowd moved in waves, gathering around each piece, admiring the stark contrasts, and the stories woven into the fabric of each work. I caught glimpses of familiar faces, colleagues I had once shared laughter with, now looking at my art with genuine admiration. And then, I spotted him. Jake, standing near the entrance, his polished demeanor radiating confidence, unaware of the tempest brewing behind my smile. "Can you believe this?" I murmured to Sarah, who stood beside me, her eyes wide with excitement. "This is it. This is the moment." With my pulse quickening, I stepped forward to the center of the gallery, the spotlight washing over me. I cleared my throat, and the murmurs faded into silence. I knew Jake was watching, and the thought sent a thrill down my spine. "Welcome, everyone," I began, my voice steady, though my insides churned. "Tonight, I want to share a story of betrayal and reclaiming one's voice." I gestured toward my painting, feeling the weight of the audience's gaze. "This is Luna, my Mini Cooper, a symbol of my passion, my independence, and the hard work that has been overshadowed by those who thrive on the efforts of others." I saw Jake's smirk falter, the confidence flickering in his eyes. "What is she doing?" He seemed to think, but I pressed on, the momentum propelling me forward. With every stroke of the brush, I captured not just the beauty of a car, but the spirit of an artist silenced by a fraud who masquerades as a friend while stealing dreams along the way. My words were sharp, each one cutting through the air like a knife. The murmurs began to rise once more, curiosity morphing into intrigue. I could feel my fire igniting theirs. "Jake," I said, letting his name hang in the air, "you took my work, you took my car, but most importantly, you stole my spirit. Everyone here applauded you for my efforts while I stood in the shadows, watching as you built your empire on my creativity." His face turned pale, the facade cracking, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the charm. The audience shifted uneasily, eyes darting between us, the tension palpable. I could see disbelief etched across his features, and it fueled my resolve even further. "But tonight, I take back my narrative. I take back my voice." I gestured towards a series of images projected on the gallery wall, photographs of my original sketches, studio notes, and snippets of emails. Each one a testament to my creativity that he had twisted into his own. Gasps echoed through the crowd, shock spreading like wildfire as the evidence unfolded before them. Jake's arrogance dissipated. I saw fury flash in his eyes, the realization that his carefully crafted world was crumbling around him. "You're making a mistake," he shouted, his bravado crumbling as the exhibition that night was both a triumph and a reckoning, igniting a spark in the gallery that would burn brightly for weeks, if not months, to come. Jake's face, once adorned with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable, had morphed into an image of disbelief and rage. As I unveiled his deceit to the world, I felt the weight of my past lifting, the chains of humiliation and sadness shattering like glass. I was no longer a victim, I was a force to be reckoned with. The aftermath, however, was not as clear-cut as I had hoped. The initial applause for my artwork soon turned into whispers, some of admiration, but many filled with uncertainty and gossip. Colleagues I had once considered friends now looked at me with a mix of awe and wariness. The divide was palpable. Those who stood firmly behind Jake seemed to vanish into the shadows, while others began to rally around my cause. But the fallout was swift. Jake, confronted with undeniable evidence of his deception, retaliated. In the weeks that followed, I watched him spiral into a defensive state fueled by desperation. He tried to sway the narrative, crafting a story of his own to undermine my claims, painting me as a bitter artist who couldn't handle rejection. His allies, once loyal, began to question their own judgments. The web of lies he had spun started to unravel, but not without collateral damage. I was called into meetings, scrutinized for my bold confrontation. Many viewed me as an instigator, someone who had disrupted the harmony of the gallery. I could feel the tension in the air, a thick miasma of uncertainty and fear. Some colleagues whispered in corners, unsure of where to align themselves, while others openly supported me, their encouragement fueling my resolve. I learned quickly that creating art was one thing, but navigating this new social landscape required a different kind of creativity, one that involved careful maneuvering through alliances and enmities that felt like a minefield. The gallery owner, bemused by the chaos unfolding, decided to issue a public statement in support of me, citing the importance of integrity in the art world. Undeniably, this was a win, but it left a bitter taste. My work, my passion, had become a battleground for a war that I never chose to fight. I felt a pang of guilt for the inevitable fallout that would come from my revenge. People who had nothing to do with Jake's betrayal were now caught in the crossfire of our conflict. Yet, the spotlight I had sought brought a newfound visibility, and with it, opportunities I never imagined. Offers for solo exhibitions flooded in, and a few patrons expressed interest in my work, eager to support the artist who had found her voice amidst the chaos. But every time I stood before a canvas, The memory of Jake's betrayal seeped into my brushstrokes. I could not escape the truth that my art was forever intertwined with my pain. As the months rolled on, I began to notice subtle changes in Jake's behavior. The once charismatic figure now walked through the gallery with his head down, the bravado stripped away like layers of paint. He was a ghost of the man he once was, his reputation marred by the exposed truths of his opportunism. The colleagues who once admired him looked at him with disdain, and the applause that used to follow his every word turned to silence. I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt as I witnessed his downfall. While he had taken so much from me, I could not shake the creeping feeling that I had taken something from him, too. But it became clear.
It's 3 a.m., and the glow from my phone screen feels like the only light left in my life. The quiet of the house surrounds me, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in my heart. I should be sleeping, but every time I close my eyes, I see them, my husband and her, giggling at some inside joke while I sit at home, oblivious and trusting. I can almost hear her laugh, high-pitched and sweet, as if it could drown out the reality of her existence in our lives. If this was a different time, a different place, maybe I could have brushed it off, chalked it up to bad luck and human frailty. But right now, I feel the urge for justice bubbling within me like molten lava, ready to erupt. Let me set the stage for you. I'm Emma, a 32-year-old mom of 2 beautiful kids who mean the world to me. I've poured my heart and soul into our family for over a decade. I've been the supportive wife, the caretaker, and the partner who believed in the promise of forever. We built a life together, a home with laughter echoing off the walls, a backyard where our children play, and dreams we painted together beneath the stars. But all of that crumbled when I stumbled upon the text messages that shattered my world like broken glass. He, Ryan, my husband, the man I trusted with my everything, had been carrying on an affair with someone I've never met, but whose name feels like acid on my tongue, Lisa. The moment I saw her name flash on his screen, my heart plummeted. I thought I was ready for anything, but the cold reality was like a punch to the gut. I spent hours going back through our history, replaying memories in my mind, piecing together when things had started to unravel. It's terrifying how easily you can be deceived by someone you love. Now, I'm on the brink of unleashing my fury on the very person who thought it was okay to step into my life, to cross boundaries that should have remained sacred. Should I go public? Should I bring the world into my pain? The desire to expose Lisa burns in my chest like wildfire. I want her to feel the weight of my heartbreak, the destruction she's caused, and the betrayal I never saw coming. As I sit here, the clock ticking away the silent hours, I'm torn between rage and despair. I see the 2 faces who turned my life upside down, Ryan's guilt-ridden, confused expression and Lisa's brazen arrogance shining through her social media posts. It's time for the world to know the truth. But first, I need to gather my thoughts and summon the courage to pull the trigger. Should I go through with it? Should I press send on that post that could expose the truth? I can feel my heart racing as I prepare to share my story, to lay bare the reality of my life for all to see. I'm ready to reclaim my narrative, to stand tall in the face of their betrayal. The world won't turn a blind eye to my pain. Not anymore. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Each night, I lay in bed next to Ryan, pretending to be asleep while he scrolled through his phone, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in my heart. I had no idea that every time I kissed him goodnight, he was hunting a thrill in someone else's embrace. I remember the moment I confronted him, how the air felt thick and heavy, almost suffocating. The look on his face when I presented the evidence was a mix of shock and guilt, as if I had thrown a bucket of ice water over his head. It was then I realized he was just as much a stranger to me as Lisa was. "Emma, I can explain," he stammered, his voice trembling as if it were about to shatter. I wanted to scream, to throw a lamp at his head, to make him feel the anguish that was radiating off me in waves. Instead, I felt hollow, like a shell of the woman I used to be. My dreams of a perfect family shattered into a million pieces, and with them, any semblance of trust I had in him. Why her? Why Lisa? I wanted to ask him. Was it her laugh that drew him in, or her carefree spirit that made him forget about the weight of our shared years? Was she the embodiment of everything I felt I wasn't anymore? I was just a tired mom trying to balance grocery lists, school drop-offs, and work deadlines while he was out there seeking validation in someone who had no claim on our life. The days turned into a blur of tears and anger. My best friend, Chloe, tried to comfort me, but every kind word felt like rubbing salt into an open wound. "You deserve better, Em," she said, her eyes filled with sympathy. But I felt like a fool for believing in our love story. I could almost hear Lisa's voice in my head, taunting me with her casual confidence. While I was pouring every ounce of myself into raising our kids and keeping the home alive, she was laughing with my husband, enjoying the thrill of something forbidden. I cyber-stalked her, and it made everything worse. Lisa thrived in her glossy, curated world of Instagram posts showcasing brunches, vacations, and cute selfies with Ryan, each one a dagger to my heart. I found a photo of them together, arms intertwined, and it was as if the breath was knocked out of me. The caption, "Life is too short to waste time on anything less than amazing," sparkles emoji, 2 hearts emoji, felt like a cruel joke. Had they ever considered the life we built together? Did she care that her amazing was my nightmare? Every morning, I'd wake up and check his phone, hoping to find something, anything, that could give me answers. I found more messages, more proof of their secretive rendezvous. I was a detective in my own life, piecing together the puzzle of their deceit while I stood on the sidelines, feeling like a spectator in my own marriage. I often thought of my children, their innocent laughter echoing through the halls, oblivious to the turmoil swirling in their mom's heart. I wanted to shield them from the reality of their father's betrayal, but at the same time, my mouth watered at the thought of making Lisa's life as complicated as mine had become. I imagined her embarrassment, the guilt that would seep into her perfect life. I wanted to see her squirm, to know she was not untouchable, that her actions had consequences. It was all-consuming, this need for revenge, an insatiable hunger that gnawed at my soul like a relentless predator. Each day that passed felt heavier than the last, as if I were carrying the weight of a world that no longer cared for my existence. The emotional roller coaster I found myself on was dizzying. One moment, I was a mother trying to keep things together for my children, and the next, I was a woman bent on delivering a reckoning. I started to lose myself in the process. My days were filled with a haze of anger and confusion. I could barely focus at work. My colleagues greeted me with their usual cheery banter, but I was miles away, trapped in a mental prison of betrayal. A small part of me wanted to break down and share my pain, but the other part, the part filled with rage, clenched my jaw and pushed it all down, determined to keep my secret, my plan, and my emotions locked away. As the days turned into weeks, I began to obsess over Lisa. I'd wake up in the early hours of the morning and scroll through her social media profiles, each photo feeling like another punch to the gut. I watched her life unfold like a movie, each post a reminder of what I'd lost. She was a social media influencer, a master of capturing life's best moments. But I saw through it all. I saw the fakeness behind the smiles, the facade of happiness that was built on the foundation of my shattered marriage. The more I saw, the more I ached for revenge. I envisioned her face when the truth came crashing down around her, when her friends and followers found out that she was the homewrecker. I wanted to strip the glamour away, to expose the ugly truth hidden behind her perfectly curated life. In my mind, I started to draft the post that would reveal her secrets, my fingers itching to type the words that would rip her world apart. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. Just when I thought I couldn't feel worse, it did. One evening, I overheard Ryan on a phone call while I was washing the dishes. The sound of water splashing around me drowned out his words. But every now and then, I heard Lisa's name and my heart stopped. For a few fleeting seconds, I was paralyzed, my hands gripping the sink tightly, knuckles white. "Yeah, I miss you too," he said, his voice smooth and casual, as if he were discussing the weather. "We can figure out the details later. Just give me a little time, all right?" I felt the rage boil in my veins, hot and consuming. It was one thing to have a fleeting affair, but to hear him talking to her like that, like she was the one who mattered most, it sent me spiraling. I stopped washing the dishes and leaned against the counter, my heart racing as I fought the urge to confront him right then and there. The facade was crumbling, I could feel it. The anguish twisted in my stomach like a knife, deepening with each syllable. The next night, I Stumbled across a text that would mark the tipping point. Can't wait to be with you again this weekend. Just us. I felt like I had been shot. The urgency of their plans felt like a declaration of war against the life we built together. I was no longer just a wronged wife, I was a warrior preparing for battle. I turned to Chloe, desperate to share my pain. I can't do this anymore, I confessed, my voice cracking as I held back tears. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I'm falling apart. Chloe looked at me, her eyes wide with understanding as the gravity of my heartache sank in. Emma, you deserve to be happy. You have every right to stand up for yourself. You can't just let them get away with this. Her words were like a lifeline thrown into the turbulent sea of my emotions, pulling me back from the brink of despair. But what did that mean? What did standing up for myself look like when I had been so profoundly disrespected? That night, as I lay awake with my heart pounding in my chest, the truth began to crystallize. I couldn't keep living in a state of paralysis, trapped in my own mind, replaying the endless loop of betrayal and hurt. I felt the fire igniting within me, raw and powerful, and suddenly it all clicked. I wasn't just a victim, I was a force to be reckoned with. I pulled out my phone, the screen shining in the darkness like a beacon. I began to type, my fingers moving almost of their own accord. My heart raced with each word, as if I were pouring molten rage onto the screen. I had never been one to seek conflict, but this wasn't just about me anymore, it was about reclaiming my power, my dignity. The words flowed out like water from a broken dam. To those who think they can step into my life and steal joy that's not theirs to take, let me remind you that the truth always finds a way out. You might think you're living the dream, but it will all come crashing down. I refuse to be silent while you play house with my husband. I paused, breathless, as I read over my message. Each sentence felt like a small victory, a rebellion against years of quiet suffering. But it wasn't just a post. It was a testament to my strength, a declaration of war against the lies that had invaded my life. I realized I wanted Lisa to feel the weight of her actions, to confront the consequences of her choices. I wanted her to know that she was no longer a shadow lurking in the corners of my life, she was front and center, and I was ready to take a stand. As I hovered over the post button, I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me. The fear was still there, a nagging doubt that whispered about the fallout, the damage this could unleash. But the voice of anger was louder, the urge for justice more persuasive. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my narrative, about letting the world know that I wouldn't be a victim any longer. In that moment, I made the decision that would change everything. I would no longer be the quiet, hurt wife, nursing my wounds in solitude. I would boldly share my story, my truth, and in doing so, I would begin to heal. I envisioned Lisa seeing the post, her smug smile turning to disbelief, panic, and ultimately shame. I imagined the looks on her friends' faces as they read the words I had crafted with so much pain. My finger hovered over the screen, my heart racing with excitement and fear. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a second, and then pressed send. The moment the words went live, it felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding as the reality of my decision set in. I had taken a leap into the unknown, a leap that felt terrifying yet exhilarating. Suddenly, the doubt that had plagued me for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a surge of empowerment as dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, the adrenaline still coursing through me. My heart was racing, my hands trembling with both fear and excitement. The post was live. I could hardly believe it. I knew I had to prepare for the aftermath, my revenge plan was in motion, and I needed to be strategic about it. 1. Document everything. The first step was a no-brainer. I began compiling everything related to Ryan and Lisa's affair, screenshots of texts, photos of their social media interactions, and even timestamps from our shared family calendar that pointed to his lies. I wanted concrete evidence to back up my claims, should anyone question the validity of what I was about to expose. It was important for me to have this arsenal of proof, not just to protect myself, but to serve as a reminder of the reality I was living. 2. Enlist allies. I reached out to a few close friends, those who had seen the cracks in my marriage before I did. I needed support, both emotionally and logistically. Chloe was my first call. I did it, I said, my voice quaking with a mix of victory and fear. I posted about them. I need you to help me spread the word. She promised to share my post and encourage others to do the same. The more people who knew, the more power I'd reclaim over the narrative. I also contacted a few trusted acquaintances of Ryan's, people who had always seen our family as a unit. I wanted them to hear my side before Ryan could spin his own narrative to make himself look like the victim. 3. Create a countdown. I knew I had to time the fallout perfectly. I calculated the weekend when Ryan would next be free from work and scheduled to see Lisa again. I wanted to ensure that my post was fresh in everyone's minds when they came together. I imagined their plans spiraling into chaos as they realized that I had blown the lid off their secret. I envisioned Ryan's face when he discovered that the people he trusted the most had turned against him, armed with my truth. I was going to infiltrate their weekend plans and turn it into my own version of a friendly gathering, one filled with witnesses to the fallout. 4. Prepare for confrontation. I knew that I needed to confront Ryan head-on after the post went viral. I started rehearsing what I would say, crafting a script in my mind that combined strength with clarity. I wanted him to see the gravity of his actions, not just the betrayal, but how he shattered my trust, our family, and the lives of our children. I was determined to break down his defenses and make him own his actions, while also preparing for his inevitable attempts to manipulate the situation. I would stand my ground, speaking my truth with unwavering confidence. 5. Social media blitz. I began crafting additional posts to go live in the days leading up to the weekend. I wanted to create an avalanche of awareness about the affair. I wrote about the realities of infidelity, how it feels to be deceived, and the emotional toll it takes on families. I included hashtags like #CheatersExposed, #infidelity, and #truthmatters in the hopes of reaching a wider audience. I encouraged my friends to share their own experiences with betrayal, creating a community of support around my situation. I wanted people to rally behind me, to remind me that I wasn't alone in this fight. 6. Gather evidence of his lies. While I continued my digital search for revenge, I began to gather evidence of his lies. I strategically arranged for my friends to catch Ryan in the act of deceit. I instructed Chloe to invite him to a gathering under the guise of wanting to have a family-friendly weekend with the kids. It was a perfect cover, and I knew it would create the opportunity I needed for the confrontation. As the weekend approached, my heart danced a chaotic rhythm between anxiety and exhilaration. I felt like a beast poised on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into the fray. I went through every message, every photo, honing in on the perfect chaos I was about to unleash. The countdown was real now. Just 2 days left until I would turn my pain into a weapon of justice. The day finally arrived. I woke up with butterflies in my stomach, the thrill of impending revenge coursing through my veins. I donned a simple, yet striking outfit that made me feel confident, my favorite dress that hugged my curves just right, my makeup on point, ready to reveal to the world the fierce woman I had become. This day was about more than just revenge, it was about reclaiming my identity, my voice, and my power. I dropped the kids off with my parents, knowing they would be safe while I played the role of the unassuming wife. The moment I stepped into Chloe's house where the gathering would take place, I felt an electric charge in the air. Friends had begun to arrive, and I noticed many of them giving me sympathetic smiles, their eyes filled with unspoken understanding. They had seen the hurt, the pain I had been carrying for far too long. I could feel their support surrounding me, a protective shield against the storm that was about to erupt. Ryan arrived later, blissfully unaware of the trap that lay in wait for him. He greeted everyone with a casual smile, completely oblivious to the tension brewing beneath the surface. I watched him, a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside me. How could he be so careless? Had he truly thought he could continue living a double life with no consequences? I was ready to shatter that illusion. As the evening progressed, laughter and chatter filled the air. The children played in the background, normalcy contrasting sharply with the storm about to unfold. I caught Ryan stealing glances at his phone, a nervous habit I had come to recognize, and it filled me with a sense of satisfaction. He was on edge, and for the first time, it was because of his own choices. Then, at the perfect moment, I decided it was time. "Hey everyone." I called out, my voice steady as I stood, commanding attention. The room quieted. Eyes shifted to me, curiosity piqued. "I know this is a lovely gathering, but I have something important I'd like to share." Chloe exchanged a glance with me, a silent reassurance. I could see the anticipation in her eyes, knowing full well the gravity of what was about to unfold. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 1,000 emotions crash over me. It was now or never. "Ryan," I said, my gaze fixed on him, unwavering. "We need to talk. And I think everyone deserves to hear this." I paused for dramatic effect, letting the tension simmer in the air. I could see the color drain from his face. The room grew silent, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. "Do you remember last week?" I continued, my voice rising as I recounted the tale of betrayal. "When I found the texts on your phone? Or did you think you could?" The air in the room grew heavy as the weight of my words sank in. I could feel the collective breath of my friends held in anticipation, and the shock on Ryan's face was priceless. It was a mixture of fear and disbelief, as if he were a deer caught in headlights. I relished the moment, the sweet taste of justice mingling with the bitterness of betrayal. "What are you talking about, Emma?" he stammered, trying to regain his composure, his voice trembling ever so slightly. "This isn't the place for this. We can talk about it later." But there was no later, not anymore. "No," I said firmly, cutting him off. "The time for secrets is over. Lisa, the woman you so brazenly decided to betray our family with, she's not just some fling. We all deserve to know the truth about who you really are." I could feel the room shift, the tension morphing into a palpable energy. Gasps echoed from the gathered friends, some exchanging horrified glances as the truth unraveled like a poorly stitched seam. "This is just a misunderstanding," Ryan protested weakly, but I could see him faltering, the facade crumbling. "You think this is a misunderstanding?" I retorted, my voice rising in volume, filled with a fierce determination that surprised even me. "I have screenshots, messages, and proof of everything. You've been lying to me, to our friends, to our children. You've destroyed everything we built together, and for what? A thrill? A moment of distraction?" The faces around us varied in expressions, some looked sympathetic, while others held anger towards Ryan. I found solace in knowing that I wasn't alone in this fight. My friends were rallying behind me, and I could almost hear their unspoken support. Ryan's expression shifted from confidence to sheer panic as he realized that the crowd was no longer on his side. "Emma. Please," he pleaded, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Let's talk about this privately." But I was done talking privately. I wanted the world to see him for who he truly was. I turned and addressed the room, letting the words pour out of me with a cathartic release. "For those of you who don't know, Ryan has been having an affair. He's been lying to me while pretending to be the devoted husband." I pointed at him with conviction, letting my anger fuel my voice. "And this is not just my battle. It's a shared experience for anyone who's ever been deceived." I could see Lisa's name hanging in the air, a specter that haunted this moment, and it felt liberating to finally say it openly. "It's not just the act of cheating that hurts, it's the breach of trust, the loss of what you thought was real. I won't remain silent about it any longer." As I spoke, I watched the reactions from my friends. Some were nodding in agreement, others were whispering in disbelief. I saw Chloe's eyes shine with pride. She knew the weight of my struggle and had stood by me through the darkest moments. The support I felt from them was like a warm embrace, igniting a fire in my heart. Finally, I turned back to Ryan, whose expression had shifted from denial to despair. "I hope you know that this is just the beginning. I'll be sharing this story with everyone, and I won't let you manipulate the narrative." At that moment, as I held Ryan's gaze, I felt liberated. It was as if I had uncovered a new part of myself, a